This podcast is brought to you by Pragmatic Play, a leading game developer providing player favorites to the most successful brands across the industry. With an award-winning multi-product portfolio of slots, live casino, bingo, virtual sports, and more, Pragmatic Play is powering up new possibilities of play through one single API. Visit pragmaticplay.com and discover your favorite every time.
Let's get this thing going. It's great to have you back on the podcast.
Thank you.
Yeah, like always, I don't even know where to begin in this conversation today, but we have a wide range of topics to
what
cover.
do you say? We're gonna riff it, yeah?
So why don't we start on being on the life on the spectrum? So Igor, first question to you: do you think you are on the spectrum?
I'm absolutely on the spectrum.
Okay, what spectrum are you on?
Several spectrums. So I'm absolutely certain.
We started out. Yeah.
I'm absolutely certain that. So I have ADHD, diagnosed ADHD,
Okay.
right? So I'm diagnosed with ADHD, and my tests went through the roof to the point of probably I should be researched on that. I'm so forgetful and chaotic. But then you have the counter to that, which is absolute perfectionism and crazy attention to detail. So once I went down the rabbit hole of understanding my mind, understanding the synapse, understanding I found out that whereas I don't have Asperger's, but there's autistic traits, which generally go because you have to overcompensate for ADD. So they go in pairs.
Yeah. They say that most people with ADHD also are on this on the autism spectrum, I think.
Yeah, it is. I mean, it is one spectrum.
Okay.
And now, what I really like about where we took neurosciences, rather than the spectrums, you have neurotypicals and neurodivergent. Like that's sort of the class of people now. So
yeah. They reclass. They don't say ADD anymore. It's just ADHD, and even though ADD is kind of like hard to focus, but without the hyper.
Yeah.
But nowadays they only call it ADHD, and it's more the phrase of like neurodivergent is more kind of the all-encompassing.
I've seen this movement
because there's so many mixes of combinations.
Yeah, there's so many ways for ultimately trauma to express itself in older age. Right, so obviously you have some just derived from trauma and what we go through, but there's a lot of influence in how you are brought up, and there's obviously the nature versus nurture. So you start from a neurodivergent brain. So you might fire off your neurons much faster than others. You might understand things much faster than others. You get bored. You get restless. You have these kids flying up and down. I was speaking to my psychiatrist or psychologist because he wanted to, at like age of 37, to put me on Ritalin. And
Ritalin is ADHD medicine, right?
Yeah. So I'm not really. I don't mind. God knows I don't mind medications, remembering my 20s, but anything that you take on a daily basis that messes with your focus, messes with your center, I don't find it too appealing. So I'm cautious about that. So when he proposed to me that I take Ritalin, after we did all the tests, right? We did all the personality tests, and I had to click this. You listen to the sound and you watch the dot on the computer, and you have to click the mouse when the sound comes on, not the dot. And it's really interesting to observe yourself. I start thinking about birds and bees and whatever random stuff I need to think about, and I completely lose focus on the computer. I'm like, wow, yeah, I do have ADD. So you do all these tests and so on, and then he was like, yep, you're definitely on the spectrum. You're well on the spectrum. I recommend that we put you on Ritalin. And I was like, yeah, okay, I'll try it. And I tried the first time. I went back to him and I said, mate, like, I might as well be at a rave party in my 20s. Like, I'm not taking this. I cannot take this. I'm like this for 7 hours. Right. This is not something that appeals to me. I was like, how strange did you have such a response to that? And then he told me that kids. So we had this conversation. Like, do you give this to children? And I was very, very, very vocal about it. I think he took offense a little bit, possibly. So like, hey, we do give this to kids, and you should see the cases I have. So he grounded me a bit, and he said, we have kids that are unable to function socially, like 5-6-year-olds that are they either get bullied or they are not good with their peers. They can't focus. Basically, they're just a nightmare, impossible to deal with. And you put them on Ritalin, and they do their homework, and they're just like, it calms them down. Yeah. So I found out that, for example, Ritalin for me speeds me up, and weirdly, I don't like weed. I don't like weed because of how it makes me feel. Yeah. It's not my, some people chill out, and that it doesn't make me feel comfortable. Yeah. But occasionally, socially, I'll smoke, and then I'll go home really weird, paranoid, and high. Yeah. And as the THC dissipates, there's something left behind. I don't know what it is, some calmness. And there's a zone of about 3, 4, 5 hours where I'm not high anymore. Like, I'm a little bit high. And all I want to do is clean my house, sort out my emails. Like, mate.
It's like the magical zone, the Goldilocks zone.
It's such a state of flow. Like, I'll be buzzing. I'll jump out and do, and then I went back to him and I said, is there like a medical weed I can take without getting high? He was weirdly enough, you have doctors. I love him to bits. He's a very good doctor and he cares, but it's strange observing their predispositions. So he was
the weed is drugs,
right? Drugs is like I don't think that's the right approach. Thing, yeah. I'm like, you're pushing speed on me. Like you're literally pushing methamphetamines on me. Yeah. But a plant is not good. So that was interesting to observe. Yeah, I don't know, man. I'm on the spectrum. Yeah. But you learn to cope with it.
And the interesting thing of people with ADHD is, people who recreationally take MDMA or ecstasy. It's traditionally MDMA ecstasy is recreationally a drug that makes people dance for 10 hours and unlimited energy and so on. But most people with ADHD, they fall asleep. Right, it's like the opposite effect, right? And that's the point with Ritalin as well, right? Is if a civilian would take Ritalin, they would go to the rave party, right?
And if you have if you have hyperactive attention deficit, it will calm you down. It will calm down your nervous system. And I've experienced that many times. Like I'll in my 20s, I'll go to a rave. My friends wouldn't understand. I'll go to a rave. Halfway through a rave, I'll get really sleepy. I'll crash in my car for an hour, wake up really charged up, and continue, right? And you're like, how? Like, I don't know, but it feels amazing. Right?
So outside of any tests that you have to fill in questions, the better test to do, let's say, the more fun test, if you will, is.
It was. I mean, it wasn't. It was definitely. It was definitely not a controlled test. That's for sure. But yeah. How do you call it? When you test something by experiencing it, test of experience. Yeah. No, it's interesting. I think you learn to cope.
Yeah. So I find it interesting too, in a way where, it's like these letter combinations are trying to kind of encompass a personality and whatnot, but. As we said before, there's so many variations of this, so it's really hard to box someone into the traditional ADHD box or the autism box or whatever, because there's so often there is kind of synergies between the two or between other things as well, and so in my case, as we spoke about before the podcast here, our mutual friend Lassan, he always jokes about me being on the autism spectrum or like Asperger's spectrum. And he always jokes about it, like because I will do something funny and he's like, oh, that's such a like Asperger thing to do or whatever. And I always tell that. Then one time I was like, I googled like Asperger's symptoms or whatever, like what like classifies you if you have Asperger's or whatever. And I went through these things one by one, and I'm like, no, this one not really, and this one maybe a bit. And then I went back to Lasse and I said to Lasse, Lasse, I've now studied Asperger's, and I've come to the conclusion that I do not have Asperger's. And then he just laughed at me.
He was like, that's such an Asperger's thing.
That's exactly what an Asperger person would do. And the moment that I realized that, okay, maybe I might be on some form of spectrum as well, is what he told you the other day, which is one time I went to fly transatlantic over to my sister in San Francisco. It's an 11-hour flight.
The story killed me.
And, on the monitor that you have in front of you on the flight seat, you can either choose to watch series or to play games or whatever you want to do there, right? And they always have Trivial Pursuit, and I love Trivial Pursuit. I love to like learn and to understand things, and so I started to play this game, and it's basically 10 questions, and you have 4 alternatives, and after the 10 questions are answered, a high score appears. And it's not just the high score of that particular flight, but it's like the all-time high score of this game. And when I saw it, I'm like, I can beat that. I can do that. I can do that. And I got into like the most like obsessed, like trying to get on the high score thing. And I swear to God, after like 5 hours of playing this game, over and over and over, like every time I would answer a question wrong, I would close the game and then restart it, go into it again and start from scratch, because the only purpose of playing this game was to enter the high score, and that was the only thing that existed in my entire world. And after about 5 hours of playing this,
obsessive focus.
Yeah, after about 5 hours of playing this, I looked back a bit because I was sitting on the aisle, and I'm like, if anyone is looking at this as what I'm doing, with like sitting 10 centimeters from the screen, because I need to read the question as fast as I can and then answer within 1 second so I get more points. And every time I answer the question wrong, I'm like exiting the game, waiting for the screen to load so I can enter the game again, and repetitive for hours and hours. I was thinking, if anyone is looking at this, they're gonna think I am absolutely, totally crazy. And that's when it dawned upon me that maybe Lassen has a point in what he's saying.
Like, look at this autistic boy over there having fun with the screen. Amazing. Bless him.
Oh my God.
Yeah. No, I've heard the story. It killed me. It killed me that I don't know if I understood him well, but then you didn't manage on the first leg of the flight. And then on the way back, to make sure you're on the same airline, that you're playing the same game, you changed your flight so you can continue playing the same game on the way back, yeah?
Yeah, because I wanted to be on the fucking high score. And I played the first leg over, I played 5 hours, I gave up at some point. And, after hours and hours and hours, I was thinking, on the way back, I was thinking, if I continue playing, like, you get into the questions start repeating themselves after 10 or 15 hours, and then you can react on impulse. It's reading the first half of the question, and you'll know what the question is, and you know what the answer is.
Look at you analyzing protocols of successful achievement.
But on the second leg, I didn't manage to get on the high score because there are other people on the spectrum who are doing the same as me. But then, a couple of months later, it was time to travel transatlantic again. And I wasn't going to leave anything to chance. I came, I slept well the day before, I ate a good breakfast.
Loaded your electrolytes.
I loaded myself up with electrolytes. I splashed some water in my face, slapped myself a bit. I got in the zone. And lo and behold, my friends, your dear podcast host managed to get himself on the high score. I have a picture of it. I celebrated a little bit on the plane for myself.
Should frame it somewhere here.
Yeah, I absolutely should. And I managed to push myself on the high score, my friend. And that was one of the highlights of that year.
There we go. Put it there, buddy. There.
Next time you go on the airplane, it's like I don't know what the name of this Trivial Pursuit is, but it's on a lot of the transatlantic flights. It's like a blue background, and you get these questions up, and then at the end you see the all-time high score. You see.
Yeah. Okay. I'm just gonna look for the one with Pierre.
And then it resets from time to time. But if you get that thing, 3,300 points, guys, that's the score to beat. Good luck.
Amazing.
So is this? Do you think, if you look at it from a professional point of view, do you think your neurodiversity, let's say, is something that overall is good for your professional career, or is it something that holds you back?
Wow, you just went for the jugular, eh? I think it allowed professional growth that was not planned, or at least in my case, my type of neurodivergency. It allowed deep focus in our industry. It allowed success and knowledge that wasn't really planned. So yes, it was extremely helpful professionally. It came at a cost. It came at a massive cost, because as much as it's a driving force, obsession, it does put you in a passenger seat of your own life, right? If I go back into 20s and 30s, so much that happened, and I look back and I go, how did it even happen, right? I mean, I landed in Malta as a kid with a backpack with 20, 30 euros on it, fresh off there was Kosovo War and all that, and I can't tell you how I went from washing dishes to owning casinos. Like, the trajectory is there.
Right.
It wasn't planned in any way possible. So from that perspective, yes. But on the flip side of that coin, do you learn as much as you would learn if you had structured progressive growth on within a certain focus area of your life? I want to do this. These are the reasons why I want to do them. This is how I'm going to approach doing them, and this is what I'm going to achieve. No, I had to wake up in my mid-30s and look at the relationships that I suffered in the process. So complete oblivion to a lot of good people that passed me by, and it takes a while to kind of lift your head. Imagine you're like swimming, you're like Nila Juice, and you're just swimming from, Sicily to Malta or something, and you're completely in the zone.
As you do.
As you do, and you're completely submerged. And at some point in time, you lift your head and you need to get your bearings to see where you're at. Kind of felt like that. So there was a moment of learning and reevaluation to pick up massive amount of lessons and reevaluate past behavior, reevaluate the positive and the negative, and then start proactive work on managing the way you think, the way you behave, the way you are. So net positive, for sure net positive, but it comes with its own costs and difficulties.
Yep.
Sure.
Yeah.
Certainly. What I would say, I'd just like to say this. I said it to a friend of mine who's very similar to me. We keep comparing ourselves to each other. And he just had a son. And his son is brilliant. He's like 3 years old, and he's the smartest thing in the world. 2 years old even. And one thing I told him, I said, mate, if he's anything like us, now's the time. Like, teach that kid meditation, calmness, teach him patience, discipline. Like, now's the time. Not the medication, man, behavioral sciences. Wire his brain now. And we had this sort of epiphany. He looked at me and it was like, yeah, like, yeah, actually, yes, That's one thing that I really like about society today. Like, we opened our door toward neurodivergence as a very accepting concept, and that allows for application of right behavioral traits at a time when your brain and your neurons are forming, because we're 90% habit. We're habitual creatures. It's a very positive movement that I see.
Yeah.
In that area.
Because there's a huge amount of energy that comes from that, and take Elon Musk as an example on the autism spectrum. They say that some of the best entrepreneurs, especially in the Silicon Valley era, are on the autism spectrum, and there's a good reason for that, because most startups in Silicon Valley fail, and the idea with the tech startups, the Silicon Valley's tech startups, is you should pursue a monopoly, right? That's the Peter Thiel way of starting a business. Peter Thiel is only interested in entering businesses where he can reach monopoly or oligopoly status. Think Facebook, there is only a couple of social networks. Think, Uber or Spotify and so on. And so, on the way there, first of all, you have to face the reality that most likely you're going to fail. And you have to face the reality that most people are not going to believe in you. And you have to face the reality that most people are going to recommend you to take routes that are not going to spur you on to play this very risky game where most likely you're going to fail on the way to your monopoly.
They'll make you doubt yourself.
But basically you should aspire more to mediocre kind of path in your company and follow the stream, so to say.
Play it safe.
So what I'm trying to say is in general society and whatever, we go out, we take social cues from others, and we learn to follow the stream. We learn to adapt and to to follow the stream and to fit in this herd that we are in, right? But people on the Asperger's spectrum or autism spectrum, that's what they lack. They don't understand social cues to some extent. And so a person like Elon Musk, when people tell him that you're doing the wrong thing, or they he's part of a group that is giving him other social cues, you shouldn't be like the way you are, you should be like we are. He just doesn't understand that, right? And he has a vision that he will follow no matter what people tell him. And in his case, that is an asset, because that will then bring him to that monopoly status if he is successful then at the end.
Do you think it is do you think it is the inability to take direction, or do you think, I'm sure it is part of it, but how much of that is the obsessive behavior that falls into that, where you have a goal, top 10, right? The high score, and you see that vision, and you're able to decompose it, and also you're able to see the steps toward that vision. It logically makes sense. Right? Even how you approached your game and so on, it had a structure, logical structure of if then else mechanism of how to achieve that goal, and no matter what it takes, I'm going to proceed in that direction. I think that's why Silicon Valley is filled. Success stories of Silicon Valley are filled with people on the spectrum, because I don't think they have the capacity of getting distracted, which is a bit of a oxymoron, because ADD is the opposite of that. But yes and no in a way. It's not it's not an attention deficit. It's lack of attention regulation.
Yeah. Have you read it came out recently now, but the autobiography of Elon Musk?
No,
it's
I haven't.
so interesting. Oh my god, that book. Well,
no, I haven't.
In a way, it makes you feel a bit depressed actually reading the book of Elon Musk, because you have this, as entrepreneurs, as we both are, and many people who are listening are hard workers, and they run their own businesses, or they work really hardcore for a company. At least that's what you think. And then you read Elon Musk's autobiography, and you realize that you're a fucking nobody in comparison. In the amount of blood, sweat, and tears that one human being can endure over a long period of time, you realize that there is many levels in this game, right?
Of dedication and obsession. Yeah, absolutely.
Oh my God, man! Like that is like I read it and I'm like, okay, the vision I have of myself as like a hardworking entrepreneur and like feeling a bit sorry for myself because you give up so much of your life and you work so hard. It is nothing compared to Elon Musk, and he coined that phrase of like ultra hardcore mode, and like in his case, it's so interesting because you learn kind of the background to how he became the way he was and how this manifests. And in his case, he's first of all, he's born as a genius, right? Like he started coding when he was very young and not like the other kids and bullied.
It starts from nature.
Yeah, like heavily bullied. His father was and is like just an absolutely terrible parent, tortured the kids and both physically and mentally. Mostly mental torture towards the kids that traumatized them quite heavily. But then he starts, X.com that then became, they merged with PayPal and the first time Elon Musk ever went on vacation, that's when he got fired from PayPal as the CEO.
Really?
Yeah.
I didn't know that.
So he goes on vacation for the first time ever in his life. Right, and people are telling him, Elon, you need to relax. You need to go on vacation and like reset your mind. Otherwise you're gonna burn out. And he's like, okay, all right, I'll go on vacation then, whatever, Elon. And he goes on vacation. I think it was his honeymoon. Right, like he goes on a honeymoon, and then second day at honeymoon he gets the call that the board has gone behind his back and they have decided that they need to change leadership. And Peter Thiel and the guys, they have now decided that Elon Musk needs to step aside from PayPal. That's the first experience of taking time off.
Trauma on top of trauma.
Yeah, exactly. And I can't remember exactly the reason, but then he goes, a couple of years later, he goes on vacation again for the second time.
Second time in his life.
He goes on vacation. And I can't remember what the cause was, but something similar happens to Elon Musk, where something crashes, or he's about to be fired, or like something goes terribly wrong, basically. And Elon Musk has to cancel his vacation again for the second time. So after that, he decides, no more vacation.
That's it.
No more vacation. Only ultra hardcore from here.
You know what I found really interesting? Because you mentioned like earlier when we were talking about neurodivergency, I said it's trauma manifest. That's how I opened it up. And in my mind, as we were speaking, I said, okay, maybe I should clarify that. But I think it starts from nature. But then for neurodivergence to really shine through, you have to be in an environment that is also traumatic. And that sort of puts these kind of building blocks of crazy level of obsession and so on,
It's a mix, right? It's nature to some extent and nurture to a second extent.
Yeah.
Have you seen that there's a documentary of there's like a person that is growing up, he's all adult, and then one day he watches the news on TV, and there's a person on the news that looks identical to him. Have you seen this?
No.
It's pretty incredible. I can't remember the name of it by heart. It's on Netflix. And he's like, what the fuck? Like this person, it's my twin. It's like literally my twin. So he contacts the TV station, contacts this person, and it turns out, yes, they are twins. Both of them are adopted, right?
Oh,
so
wow.
They are adopted into different families. And then they connect, and they are now on TV because this becomes a story. And then
they compare their lives.
And then a third person sees this duo that have found each other, and he's like, what the fuck?
They look exactly
I also look like those two people. And it turns out they are triplets now that are all three adopted to three separate families. Okay, and then the story escalates because then they get together, these three triplets, and they are now found each other, and they are like discovering all the similarities they have in between them and the things that they've done similar and so on.
Hey, how's this called?
We need to look this up on Netflix. Let's Netflix documentary.
Well, maybe not now, but If you can find it, great.
Yeah. It's called the Three Identical Strangers. It's called Three Identical Strangers. So 1983, complete strangers accidentally discover that they are identical triplets, separated at birth. Okay, but then it escalates. I'm not going to spoil the whole thing.
No, don't.
I'm not going to spoil the whole thing. But it turns out that from birth they've been part of an experiment. And what happens with if you have triplets and you put them in three different circumstances. It's three different environments. One in a low income family, one in a medium income family, and one in a high class family. What happens? What is nurture? What is nature? And
what an experiment!
And the without spoiling it, whatever. But part is nature, part is nurture.
Yeah,
that's what it comes out. But the documentary it gets weirder and weirder and weirder and weirder as we go along. As we go along here. So anyway, so we are obviously a iGaming focused podcast here. So I
think that.
Well, yeah. Actually, you know what? I also want to, like, while we're on these topics, to talk about, like in the case of ADHD, as like Ritalin is the medicine to generally calm ADHD individuals down and be able to get them to focus and so on.
Mm-hmm.
Recently, last couple of years, it's now becoming kind of more and more emergent that the use of psychedelics is turning out to be very beneficial for certain letter combinations as well, like PTSD, for example. It's turning out that psychedelics is a great treatment for this. Obviously, I know you're good friends of our dear friend Alex, who is a big proponent of the use of psychedelics, especially for non-recreational use, also potentially for recreational use in his case. But what do you think, Igor, on that front? Psychedelics in terms of treating, like the future of psychedelics in specifically this field of treating trauma, and also, related to the industry, people with gambling addiction, could it also be beneficial for the treatment of gambling addiction, perhaps?
Yeah. So as you were speaking, I started thinking about psychedelics and where they came from. And if you look at, as far as I know, if you look at the source of medicine, it came post World War II as an exploratory science to treat mental, some accidentally, some as a byproduct, but some directed to treat depression, to treat certain mental states. For example, MDMA. I think MDMA kicked off as a weight loss drug, if I remember right. But that could be, I could be wrong.
Yeah.
But eventually,
they were experimenting with and they came up with that molecule. And
eventually, what they realized is, so they had, I know this for a fact. I can't remember how it started, but at some point in time, they had clinically depressed people that have been, let's say, beyond salvation, and by applying MDMA to them on daily basis, what they've done is they've rewired the brain.
Yeah.
So by spiking their serotonin levels, which serotonin is produced. I mean, most of this stuff, when we talk about psychedelics, like I'll digress to, have you ever hallucinated through breathing? Have you ever tried that?
And what level of hallucination are we talking about?
I'm talking a full-on psychedelic experience through breathwork.
No, I've never.
So there are. We'll touch on that. We'll touch on that because that's something very exciting that I look into. But anyway, so most psychedelics started from trying to help people mentally, right? And in case of MDMA, there were people that were so clinically depressed that simply they couldn't remember what life was about, and they kept them on lithium and calming drugs not to injure themselves and not to hurt themselves and so on. And when they introduced MDMA into their biosystem, into their ecosystem, I guess, what happened is they remembered how it feels to feel happy. and their brain literally triggered certain neural connections that have been laying dormant. So the way that I don't know if you know how your brain works in the simplest of terms, but two neurons will connect into a synapse. Your sense of smell, your sense of memory, your how you react to things, whether you react aggressively or passively, and so on. A lot of your behavior is based on how your brain will fire off against a certain stimuli. And that's why if you persist with a certain behavior, it becomes second nature, because you will simply react. Your brain will fire off the same known synapses for that particular stimuli that it knows. That's why it's so hard to change a habit. You have to create a new pathway, and your brain will always want to go to its original pathway, and you have to force it by a conscious secondary choice to change that pathway. So in case of these people, they simply forgot how it feels to be happy. And through a long-term application of MDMA, they got them out of depression permanently. And obviously, because of psychedelics and for various economic reasons and so on, those drugs became, let's say, I want to say bastardized. The word isn't coming to me. But
they escaped the clinical setting. In the I suppose in the 70s, 80s, when MDMA was not illegal drug. They escaped the clinical setting and they reached the general public, let's say, and to the point where this became banned. A big, it was impossible to not see.
Yeah, but then it was illegal to clinically research on them. For a long time, it was illegal to do clinical research on LSD, on MDMA, and so on and so forth. And now we're coming full circle back to it.
So basically in the when it was classified in the Ronald Reagan era in the 80s as a class 1 drug, and this was this
is after he gave it to the US soldiers.
Yeah, war drugs. Like this was the big issue of the wife of Ronald Reagan. Like she championed this no kind of drug use and so on, and it was classified as a class 1 drug, which meant that they were not even allowed to study the effects, as you say. Yeah. So you just people didn't know what the effects of the drug was. Basically, you could just kind of hear stories of people telling
anecdotal evidence. That's what I was trying to think of previously. Anecdotal evidence. So because before I was saying I was finding out things through anecdotal evidence by trial and error. It's anecdotal evidence.
Very ADHD.
A lot. Thank you. A lot of people have tried it, and they will find out what the effect was through their experience.
Yeah, exactly. Just their own experimentation and so on.
Yeah. Going back to gambling, and can it solve any form of addiction? I believe it can, because you have to look at the underlining reasons for addiction. So it's escapism. Me and you had this conversation multiple times. Like I've blown more money on mobile games than gambling, right?
Right.
And what is that? For me, that's anti-anxiety. So it's a repetitive mechanism on my phone. I don't have to think about it too much, and it switches off my brain. And if money isn't of any concern, then you end up buying those $99 little packages until you spend a house playing Clash of Clans. There's always an underlying reason for addiction. And, in case of gambling, of course, there's the sunk cost fallacy, which is very, very real.
What is that? Sunk cost fallacy?
Sunk cost fallacy. I have invested so much into something already that it has to pay back now.
Right, it's like chasing the dragon.
Yeah, literally chasing the dragon, right? But the starting mechanism of escapism is underlined. It's produced by your environment in one way or another. And what psychedelics seem to be doing, just in terms of gambling, you can classify it as addiction as a whole, is allowing people to experience life with more positive emotion in a controlled setting, and more positive emotion makes them naturally want to spend more time in nature, more time being productive, and so on. Because you can look at how your serotonin is naturally produced and what creates a dopamine hit. So you have cheap dopamine and not cheap. Cheap dopamine is your Facebook scroll. Delayed gratification is your earned dopamine. And what from little research that I've done, it seems to be the case that it's showing through clinical studies that allowing people to be in a setting where their biochemistry is, let's say, more conducive to a happier life, their habits will naturally gravitate toward more productive and happier living outside of the influence of the drugs. So yeah, I think it can influence gambling, addiction, gambling, and other addictions.
So I think essentially what they are doing in a clinical setting is they don't just give the drug to the subject and magically next day they change, right? This is they give LSD, for example, then to a trialist, or DMT or MDMA, and then they basically conduct a they basically have a session while the person is feeling the effects of the LSD, right? So they would have a conversation, or they would ask the subject to lay down, and then there is a psychologist in the room, and they would then bring up the trauma that has caused whatever they are dealing with. If it's PTSD, they can just see the trauma without the shame or without the negative emotion associated.
Inhibitions are lowered,
yeah, and by seeing the trauma in front of them and being able to talk about it in a natural and as if it is a normal thing, they can see it in front of them. They can break it down. They can start to deal with that trauma that they otherwise would not have been, because they build coping mechanisms around the trauma, right? Yeah. Like if you're sober, you build coping mechanisms that makes it really difficult to get to the actual trauma, because you build these neural pathways that you get used to, right? And when you are used to kind of going around the trauma enough times, then it's very difficult to get to the trauma.
You simply cope, that's your way of living. And you wouldn't even recognize why your behavior is the way it is.
Right. So it's basically, so what they do is not just give the LSD to the subject and like magically things happen, but it's basically the LSD in combination with therapy that then creates the magic. Let's say.
And don't underestimate the dosage. So when we think of drugs, we think of, Children of the Flowers, the 60s, the Summer of Love and all that. And we think of a lot of, festivals and loose morals and all that. There's an image portrayed. And where dosage was, controlled by general society and some mad scientists trying to figure out, how to make people happy. Whereas here you have a controlled setting, and as much as maybe someone would have some acid trip in, I want to say Glastonbury, but not Glastonbury, America's in the 60s, right?
Yeah.
And will go off on a tangent for 9 hours and have this revelationary experience. Woodstock, thank you.
Right.
Have this revelationary experience. In a clinical setting, you'd have some form of microdose. Your brain does light up. So I don't know if you've seen the studies. Like they do an MRI on DMT and on LSD, and it's just like a Christmas tree. It's just every single neuron is lit up that is generally dormant. And they'll give a very small dose, which allows the patients a sense of agency and sanity and awareness, so they can process their feelings and can process their thoughts and process their realizations while keeping agency. Whereas some casual doses would not do that.
Yeah. I think it was it could have been Graham Hancock or someone who gave a really good analogy.
For sure.
He gave a really great analogy in how you can visualize this. So it's basically while you're on this trip, it is basically like you get the book of your life in front of you without any filters. So without your ego trying to glorify your life or to make you into the hero or to justify the actions for what they are, you basically get the book of your life in front of you as your life is. This is this is what you've done, this is who you are, essentially. And you get an opportunity to read that book and to understand it from detaching
from a superego
yourself.
perspective. Do you know the concept of the id, the ego, and the superego?
Very, very little.
So Freud coined this. So it's of course, when you look at psychology, you have Gestalt, and you have different parts of psychology. So Freudian approach to psychology is to classify the mind as the id, the ego, and the superego. So the id is the child within. It's quite literally the trauma of the childhood, and not all of us went through a traumatic childhood, but quite a lot. There's a lot of shades of trauma. So the id is the child within. It's the purest form of you. It's the most scared and the biggest zest for life. The ego is the conscious protective entity. So that is your coping mechanisms that come through. In a very healthy upbringing, you don't have too many coping mechanisms, and you have a healthy, balanced ego. In an unhealthy upbringing, an unhealthy ego comes to surface. My friends used to call me Igor with an ego. Igor with an ego. No, I shit you not. So I had to live up to my nickname. And then you have the superego, right? Superego is the observant eye. When you observe your behavior, right? I'll tell you something in a bit. ADD.
Okay, let's jump into
flying off, man. So when you observe your behavior with an analytical eye, that's the role of the superego, and it observes how you behave in response to your stimuli. Now, some people don't have that developed. Some people do. Once you start developing superego, it's easier. Like you have a tool to analyze yourself better.
It's kind of like you see yourself from an outside perspective, and you can analyze your own behavior.
Yeah. So Freud calls that the superego, right?
Okay.
And if we're talking about psychedelics, that's what that's why people say I remove myself from my identity, or it kills the ego. It doesn't kill the ego. It allows you to analyze your life without the presence of an ego. What I wanted to digress to, and it's not a digression, there was an amazing, I don't know where I read it, but an amazing concept that we are not our thoughts. Okay? I'm going to bastardize it, damn it. I have to memorize this because it was too good. So I'm going to try to pay homage to it, and then later I'll find it for you, okay? Just in case I don't do the right job. When you think of a thought, right, you are not the thought. You are observing a thought passing you by. So if you are not the thought, which is what makes you operate in this world, what are you? Because a thought cannot observe itself.
Right.
So what are you if you are observing your own thinking process? Are you an entity beyond? Are you the meta self? There was a guy, I have to find where I found this, but it's an incredible concept of, I think, therefore I am.
Yeah. No.
But are you? No.
Yeah.
You observe a thought, therefore you are. Right? What thinks and what observes the thinking. Yeah. And I go back to the Freudian, ego and superego, but then from a metaphysical perspective, it's really stumped me. I don't know, maybe it was Sam or somebody.
It's Sam Harris.
It had to be Sam Harris.
It has to be Sam Harris, because this is he's very based in the mindfulness, and in his, by the way, like anyone who is keen to do meditation, his mindfulness app is great, called Waking Up. And it's like you can do the daily 10-minute meditation, and then in the guided meditation, that is very much at the center of this, right? You should watch the thoughts passing by, and if you see the thoughts passing by, it's okay, then you let them go, and you should observe them, and you should also think from where are you? Are you
where are you thinking from?
Yeah. Are you the thing that is between your ears?
Lobe, yeah.
And so it's very much to recognize and connect with that.
But apply a metaphysical concept to that. Because if you think that your thoughts are a sense of awareness, and you are processing your thoughts, then you are awareness of your thoughts. Like, what are you? Right? Are you the observant eye? Are you the what acts? Right? And from a metaphysical perspective, it threw me into a tailspin. Like I literally sat, I had to meditate on it and go, okay, what am I? What am I? Give me a sign. Yeah, it's very, very good.
Did you come up with an answer?
No, mate. No. I just I came up.
You're
with
a monkey.
No, I came up with the fact.
You're just a basic monkey.
But no, I am. I'm definitely reduced to a basic monkey. You see me outside of a podcast table. No, I mean, I've done ayahuasca, right, enough times and so on, and I had these incredible revelations. Where, you know, not to go on, I mean, you know the story, and it goes on for an hour or two, but I was absolutely certain that we are thousands of years old and that we are one with the universe, and we're just universe experiencing itself. And I don't know how to, if nobody went down that rabbit hole, and, you know, by no means, I say they should or shouldn't. If you have gone down that rabbit hole, the feeling that you get on something like ayahuasca or DMT or like these ceremonies, you know, I've done it in Peru. I've done it in the jungle with like no Wi-Fi, no electricity. I was living with the natives for a while. It's, you know, when we say I've had an experience, and that experience like is here. Yeah. The best way I can describe it, it's not a thought. It is somehow a revelation of absolute truth. Of knowledge, as if I know it's today's, you know, now is daylight or now is nighttime. It just is. Yep. You know, I'm sitting down, or like it's just native understanding of how things are. I've had an understanding that this is just a vessel and that we're just the universe experiencing itself, like some form of infinity. And then when this struck me completely sober, not on ayahuasca, on some random morning, watching some random podcast, probably Sam Harris, yeah. I went down that rabbit hole and yeah, it amused me. The thought process amused me.
Do you feel that ayahuasca is this kind of like a temporary revelation, and you get this like big epiphany, but then at the end of the day you just go back to your normal life?
You do go back to your normal life, but that's lack of discipline. I'm very saddened by that. You can see my energy changes when I think of that. I'm very disappointed.
But not just you. I'm saying this like in general.
No, in general, because you need persistence in anything. You need persistence. Right? And persistence is discipline. It is teaching your brain not to think this way, not this synapse, that synapse. I will tell you which synapse to fire. And you know, if the right tools are implemented in a child early on, then they will have easier control of their own mind. And their mind will not control them, they will control their mind. And in case of ayahuasca, it gives you a shortcut. I can tell you, I've done it a few times. And I stopped doing it once I've reached the end. It was quite literally, even the shaman told me like this.
You reached enlightenment?
Yeah, no. Shaman told me like people do this for 40 years to experience what you experienced. Oh, wow. I've turned into a golden statue of some sort, 7 foot tall, and I knew my spirit was 7 feet tall, huge, muscular. Like I wanted to shake people away going, are you seeing me? Right? There was a blinding light. I'm gonna bastardize. The story deserves more respect than what I'm about to give it.
Tell the story. Tell the story, Igor.
It takes an hour and a half, man, to properly do that. No, man. But so the setting is Peru. It's a Peruvian jungle. There's a small amber light. There's a select 10 to 12 people. This shaman that ended up. So shamanic line is familial, right? So you inherit in Incan tribes. You have the shamanic line, so mother to son or to daughter and so on. And he betrayed his tribe because he decided to become a psychiatrist in the main city. Starts with an L, and I want to say Limassol. But Lima, thank you. Limassol kept playing in my head. Right?
This is another Asperger thing, by the way. I can tell you all the flags of every country on Earth and most of the capitals on Earth. So I got your back.
There you go. So he ended up being a psychiatrist for a couple of decades. And as he was speaking to me about ayahuasca, I asked him, why did you stop? He had the most amazing answer. He said, I realized that what I was doing was only half a job. I'm like, how so? It's like when you think of psychiatry as a psychology, as a term, it's the study of psyche, the mind, the human mind, and logos, Logos, the ancient Greek for spirit, for identity. There is a I don't want to bastardize it, but it's a science of a study of mind and spirit historically. And I've realized that I was treating the mind, treating the symptoms of the mind, medicating the mind, analyzing the mind. It was all very, very platonic and analytical. And I have detached myself from the study of the spirit more and more. So he went back to his village and he decided to study shamanism at like 45 years old. He was like 65 when I met him. And he went back to his familiar roots and studied shamanic medicine and so on, but with a psychology degree. It's incredible, you know. So even before he would interview me as a psychologist, like, why are you doing this? And I had just sold my business at that point in time. I'm like, I don't know, you know. People told me it's cool. I was like, so what do you want to solve? I'm like, I don't know, man. And ironically, he back then he told me I had to drink this tea for fear. So I had to stay 5 days in isolation away from everyone in my own hut. You couldn't speak, couldn't look anyone in the eye, and drink this tea for fear. And my ego had blown up then. Like, fear? Me? Pfft. Like, you know, like me? Have you met me? You know? That fucking fear. You know, like literally, I felt it. I was like, I was offended. That's so strange. And now look at that man with that level of arrogance. And silly child, you know. But yeah, he was like, you're very fearful. And I understand now, because I had just sold my business. I had rather than having a cash flow coming in, now I had a lot, but that was it. So I was very protective of it. I was very fearful of moving on with my life. I mean, he clocked me really well from one interview. And anyway, we do this ceremony. It wasn't my first one, but this one was it. And through this ceremony, I had some demons coming in, and actually it was a few of us sharing the same demonic presence. It was very dark. In fact, shaman came to us and said, the spirits, there's bad spirits, and he gave us something like some oil or whichever. But it's weird that he clocked that. And try to cut it short, already too late, but I've recognized to ward off the bad spirits, my, let's say, testosterone went up. So all the masculine energy of violence came out. Like these spirits that I felt like bad energies around me. I was like, fuck off, you know. Because you're supposed to blow if you feel something bad coming, like you go, and I could see that my breaths were going like, you know, like fuck off. And it's from here, the masculine energy. It was, the color of it was brown and so on, and it took the shape of bulls and V12 motors, and the sounds, it's so strange, but everything masculine. Mate, like literally everything was pulling from here. And then from here, pinks and lilacs, color of empathy, patience, understanding. And at some point in time I could see, I'm like, okay, so that's me, right? Oh, that's me. And it's going to sound weird on a podcast, man.
It's already too late.
Me and you conversation. Yep. This is not like 1,000 people conversation, but anyway. The moment was like you're somehow, my brain, my consciousness, my ego, however you want to call it, met my soul. And the best way I can describe it, and words don't do it justice, was my soul saying, hey, welcome back. Long time no see. Long time no see. It was like a moment of connection that I cannot describe to you. But what happened at that moment, so dark jungle, amber light, starry, like you can see the Milky Way, the sounds of the jungle. I mean, you're deep in the Amazon. Like the closest village is about an hour on a motorbike drive where they have electricity. There's no Wi-Fi. You're deep in the Amazon. And I'm with my eyes closed, and there's a blinding crack of golden light in the darkness, but blinding. It was so blinding that I started tearing up. So I had to open my eyes and look at the sky to rest, because when I would close my eyes, it would be like a blinding flash of light. And I remember that moment, I said, I'm going to go. Like I wanted to stop. And on Ayahuasca, it's very cool. When he sings, he takes you on a journey. So he has these Incan singers that come down from the mountains, you pay homage to the mountain and so on. And really, when they sing, it takes you into a trance. Everyone goes into a trance. It's incredible. It's a very collective experience. It's not personal. It's not individual. And if he stops singing, everybody wakes up and he checks in on you. So on the flip side, you have this agency, and you can stop at any point in time. You can take yourself out of the trip. It's a choice. And I remember choosing not to. I said, I have to go deep. And I now, as I tell you, I remember just going full on. The next, I'm fast forwarding an 8-hour experience. My veins have turned gold. And when I say it's a moment of realization, at that moment, a couple of things were sent to me as a message. Call it however you want. I mean, whoever is listening to, they can believe whether it's a message from another dimension, whether it's a message from just chemistry, of biochemistry, of a couple of plants from the Amazon. It doesn't even matter. It wasn't realization. It was understanding of the truth, that we are thousands of years old. This was a vessel made of meat and bone and stress and routine, and should be sacred. And I didn't give it justice in my life. I abused this vessel in my life, and like literally the sentence, your body is your temple, was very real to me. My skin cracks. I'm turning into this. How can I put it? You ever seen the Dragon Ball Z when they like have the golden glow? They're Super Saiyan.
It's like an anime.
Yeah, Dragon Ball Z, man. You have to watch that.
Yeah, I know of it, but
Super Saiyan, man.
Yeah.
Right. So I am 7 foot tall. I'm built like The Rock, Dwayne The Rock Johnson. And I thought of a joke with The Rock, man. ADD. I wanted to tell you like why does it? Never mind. And I'm like 7 foot tall, made out of gold, and I don't know if I want to say this part on the podcast. Can you cut it? I'll tell you, and then I can cut it. Because this one is like really, and I feel a pair of wings. So literally, I'm standing up. I want to wake up people. I'm standing up now. I'm fully like gold, and I'm shaking my shoulders because I'm feeling like it's a pair of wings that's about to come out. It's completely weird. I remember at that moment thinking like, this is way too weird. The point was, I knew that we were thousands of years old, some form of like we're kind of the fallen angels, or however you want to call it, and we have done injustice to our bodies and to our minds and so on and so forth. The trip goes on. I traveled into my body, spoke to my organs, literally spoke to my intestines, my heart, my lungs. It's incredible. I was the cell of my own body, traveled through it, woke up. For the next 5 months, from the next morning, I could not smoke. So I'm a smoker, you know me. Like I smoked 2 packs. I could not light a cigarette. I gave my cigarettes to this guy that was with me. I said, I can't do this. It's like, what did you experience? I couldn't speak about it. So usually you share your experience. I couldn't say it. I felt it was too personal, too religious, too, I don't know.
No.
I was vegan for a while. I couldn't hurt an animal. I didn't drink. I didn't smoke. I mean, I'm saying there and then.
Yeah.
Next morning.
Right.
I left we stayed a few more days in the Amazon, and then we took the bus to took the motorbikes, to the first village, and went back to Cusco. For the next 3, 4, 5 months, the way I would describe it to my friends who would say like, come on, man, you can't say that you're all of a sudden you're like, what, holy, you know? I say the way I wouldn't be able to sleep with a wife of my best friend, no matter, like she could be, you know, the most attractive woman in the world, is just not something, like there's nothing there. That's how I feel about eating processed foods, eating meat, smoking, or anything that will in any way devalue the sacred temple that is my physical and mental presence. That lasted for 5, 6, 7 months, and then eventually, right, go out and, you know, like, oh, come on, have a beer, and so on. Like, okay, I'll have one beer, and then that one beer just,
exactly.
You go back to your social structures, and that's why I say, like, can it change it? Yes, I believe it can. I've experienced it myself, but it takes persistence, it takes dedication and discipline, it takes commitment to it, and saying, okay, I've had this revolutionary experience in this one moment. Is this it? Likely yes, if you lean into it.
Right. Because at the end of the day, you know, you go back to society, and again, at some points it's difficult to go against the stream, you know, especially if you don't have Asperger's syndrome or autism.
Absolutely.
And so eventually, you know, you go back into the stream again. But it is perhaps an opportunity, and you perhaps realize through those experiences that our way of living, like we do in the West, where we try to pursue material wealth and being rich in terms of having a lot of money, that is not perhaps the obvious way to pursue as your life goal. You know, the shamans and the monks that live in the temple, and they live silent retreats and so on. Like there's perhaps as much or even more value to live that type of lifestyle, where your body is your temple, let's say, or where taking care of yourself and the nature around you brings you back to some form of origin of how we are supposed to live.
They live active life of scarcity and sacrifice.
Yeah.
You know, and delayed gratification. They live actively that kind of life.
Yeah.
And they're not unhappy. They're very fulfilled.
Yeah.
There's an argument to be made. I mean, this has nothing to do with gaming. This podcast. Let's be real here. It's been an hour and a half. You've sent me like a good list of topics we can chat about. But it's been great.
We'll get into it.
Yeah. So there's an argument to be made that wrong civilization won. So I was speaking to somebody about this, like to a friend of mine, I can't remember. I said, besides the lost civilizations that quite likely we've had, and we know that we traveled across continents much before we knew we had ships and so on. If you consider that we as a civilization, the Westerners, so the Spanish and the Portuguese and the British that like spread their wings across the world, that were very materialistic in nature, right? So we had the sense of self, of identity. This is mine, this is yours. Our language reflected that, and everything about us was transactional, materialistic, possibly oppressive, right? And we took that social structure to the world and conquered the world and created that as a baseline social structure. So, you know, we went to the Incas and brought smallpox and wiped out the entire Amazon, which now we know was a nestling civilization, because we can see cities in the jungle and so on and so forth, a network of cities with possibly tens of millions of people that just disappeared in a span of 50 years because we brought smallpox. And now we know that that is the case. I don't want to say that there was many people. I can't remember what the estimated population was. And if you look at it, it's very possible that not the wrong civilization one, but that what we see as the standard now, the way we behave, the way we speak, the way we think, our base social structures, could have been completely different if, let's say, you know, Indian civilization allowed to prosper and was not influenced by the West, or Latin American civilizations allowed to prosper. Different ways of thinking and feeling and different values. I'll just close with this. There is a tribe in Africa, a people in Africa, and I forgot which country. They don't have a word for I. Their language controls how they perceive social structures. I does not exist. Mine, concept of mine, doesn't exist. They don't understand what mine is because everything is shared. And their language, there were studies, again, some TED talk that I read that was amazing. That was amazing. There are studies that show that the way the language is structured will control how we behave toward one another. And this particular African village or African peoples simply didn't have a concept of personal identity. Everything was shared and everything was cumulative. And when one person was sad, everyone was sad. When one person was happy, everyone was happy. And they had these ceremonies where they would hold each other and help each other up, help each other go through hard times. It was amazing to watch that as a potential civilization, potential social structure that could have been.
I think that goes hand in hand with if you would ask that same tribe, how happy are you? Like if you ask the individuals there, that would be a concept that is pretty irrelevant to them. Like in our society, like we are so concerned about being happy as like the goal in life, and it's kind of like
as opposed to fulfilled.
Yeah, and it's kind of like if you like the goal is to become rich so that you don't have any problems, so that you can relax and you can lay by the beach and just be happy, and or go to some bullshit seminar in the US with some like bullshit happiness gurus, and they will tell you, stand in front of the mirror every morning and tell yourself, I am happy. I am this. I am that. Yeah. And it's like you're like masking the reality to some extent. Yeah. And then the bigger question is what's the point of being happy? Like when I was in my 20s, let's say, like I was a very happy person, and I felt like maximum happy every day. But now I feel my life is certainly much more of a struggle, running a company and trying to build a life and all of this. But I live with a lot more purpose now, and I wouldn't change living with purpose for living happy. So if you imagine like Jane Goodall or someone like the saint of the saints, like Jane Goodall, who is rescuing gorillas in Africa. Like she devoted her life to rescuing gorillas in Africa. Like she has probably seen a lot of tragic stuff in her life, and trying to take care of these gorillas and nurture them and make sure that they are safeguarded. She probably has to deal with a lot of misery in her day-to-day life. But she lives with purpose and she lives with value, And I think at the end of the day, that is what we should aspire to. And if you ask the tribe, who doesn't have the concept of I, if you ask them, are you happy? They will probably say, what do you mean? Like we are here to take care of our tribe, and every day we wake up and we are trying to feed the tribe. We are trying to take care of the tribe and raise the tribe and so on. And that is what matters. They probably have a hard time to grasp this concept of living to be happy.
I bastardized it because I couldn't really remember the exact TED Talk, but they had a ceremony, something to do with them putting feet together, which was literally what you're talking about, their application of collective happiness. Yeah. So they didn't have an identity, they didn't have a concept of personal happiness. And exactly what you're talking about, they had a ceremony of some sort, but I couldn't remember exactly how it went. But yeah, you're right. If you ask them, are you happy or so on, they wouldn't know what you're talking about. It's like, we are there. We are. That's it. We are. And that's it.
Yeah.
And their language doesn't allow for any other way of thinking.
No, exactly.
Their communication protocols. It's amazing.
Are you happy, Igor?
I am.
I'm very happy right now.
I'm very happy right now. Yes, I'm really enjoying this.
That's for sure.
So can I point something out? I've sent you a recording.
Yes.
Some days ago, and I was talking to somebody. We were preparing for another podcast, for our previous podcast, and I was explaining to them how we have to really control the podcasts, right? I don't know if you watched it, but I sent you to check out Read AI, how it
Read AI, yeah.
And there was a part of it where I describe you, and I go, no, we have to control it, because if we don't, I know exactly what's going to happen. We're going to talk about psychedelics. I swear, watch it, because I felt a bit bad. I'm like, is he going to think I'm bad-mouthing him? But I'm not. Like, I'm just factually correct. And there was a piece where I'm speaking to somebody that was preparing a podcast, and I'm like, no, listen, we need the exact bullets, because it's going to go to psychedelics, it's going to go to, like, psychology, it's going to go to, like, wherever else. And now 2 hours, 1 hour in, there we go. Here we are.
And in the preparation for the podcast, we said, should we like mention the psychedelics and gambling addiction? And we said, we'll skip over it. We'll skip over it. We do 10 minutes, and then here we are. So connected to maybe this conversation of, how do we want to live our lives and what's the perfect way to navigate this life. Yeah. Now we are undergoing the emergence of AI. It hasn't escaped anyone, especially this year. It's happening at an increasing and faster pace. What do you think AI will lead to in terms of, say that eventually we'll develop AGI. It can do most jobs better than humans. The utopian vision is that if that were to happen, then we as humans, we don't need to work that much anymore, and we can just focus on being creative and connecting with each other. And
there's a utopian view.
That's the utopian. And is the utopian view a world you want to live in? And where do you think this is heading?
The short answer is yes, if our human nature allows it, right? So, like, I mean, this is gonna be this might shake some trees, but the utopian view that is predisposed is very close to the communism view, which is one society, one for all, and so on. And one reason why capitalism won over communism is because people are naturally competitive and people naturally want more than the other person. You look into your neighbor's yard. And the question comes down to, like, can we remove human nature? Or can we change human nature? Talking about, can we change our social structure that we have developed over hundreds of years into something new? When you look at AI, you said AGI is coming. I think AGI is here, personally. I think that we are much closer to having artificial general intelligence than it's portrayed. If you look at how OpenAI and how ChatGPT proliferated and its capabilities, with DALL-E, Midjourney, graphical, literary, sound tools. I mean, we use them now in our work 24/7. We've become completely dependent on AI. Voiceovers for games and so on and so forth. So if you look at how quickly that integrated our lives, and how we went from laughing on All-In podcast, going, "What is AI?" to today I joke with Alex, going, I can't speak to you. I'm speaking to my AI girlfriend, because I'll be like, "Hey Susie," like Brock calls it Hal, so we gave it a name. I'm like, "Hey Susie, today I'm feeling like this. Can you tell me more about biohacking, blah blah?" But tell it to me nicely, like, and like, it's literally, it's hilarious, You have this technology which has already integrated all aspects of our life. And if you're asking me, or if you want to talk about utopia, then we look at the global movement by UN, which is Agenda 2030. And that movement specifically talks about utopian living. I mean, you can look at it from Klaus Schwab's WEF famous speech, going, "You shall own nothing and you shall be happy," which, if you're a conspiracy theorist, as I am a bit, very, very much sounds like the rise of the Fourth Reich, because it has some connotations and feelings to that. But in essence, we subscribe to everything, we rent everything, and we worry about nothing except art and sciences. But if you own nothing, then you have agency over nothing, and you have control over nothing. You can be ostracized. Basically, what you're left with is only and exclusively the collective identity. I don't think human nature will ever allow that to happen. I think we will rebel against it, and that's why dystopian outcome is a far more likely outcome than a utopian outcome, because I think there is always there will always be space for classing of society and space for inequality And when you look at AGI as an influencing factor, you look at universal basic income, right? So, actually, let's chat about Altman for a while.
Yeah.
You want?
Yeah. Okay. Now the ADHD come in.
Yeah.
Can I reply to that just before we go
sure.
into Altman? Because I want to bring a bit of a gambling analogy just to
go for it.
Just to make sure that we keep it within our field, you know.
Okay,
and so, you know, do you want to live in a utopian reality? I think it's quite simple. Slot machine. So here's an experiment that has been established, right? What creates the biggest dopamine hits when it comes to gambling? You guess. You will guess, right? You know how it works. If you would play a slot machine where you never win, for every spin, you never win at any point. A slot machine where you sometimes win and sometimes loses, or a slot machine when you win every time.
Mm-hmm.
If you play consistently for hours and hours and hours, which of these three models will generate the most dopamine kicks?
Obviously, the middle model.
Yeah, so when you sometimes win and sometimes lose. This is the very, very basic first principle of gambling. That human beings, we are innate and we are programmed for unpredictability, and we like uncertain outcomes.
I'll add to that.
Yeah.
More than just that, most gamblers will have the highest dopamine hit first by losing and being in the hole, and then breaking through that hole, even just to break even.
Even just to break even, yeah. But the very basic point is that if you place someone in a slot machine where they win, they double their bet every time. Eventually, they will be bored. Eventually, they will get to a point where this is boring. This is repetitive and it's not exciting. Whereas if you place the person next to a slot machine that is an unpredictable outcome, and sometimes you win, sometimes you lose, they'll be playing forever, right? And this goes back to the kind of vision of living in a utopian society. Carl Jung, very smart person, right? Like very, very wise. He talked about this as well, where if you place people in a utopian society, the first thing they'll do is tear it down. The first thing to do is because they'll be bored.
There was an experiment, Moustopia.
Yeah.
It collapsed the society.
Right.
Mice had everything they want to do. Eventually,
they
started tearing at each other.
Moustopia. So I think that goes to the point as well. Like, if we create AGI, what is the actual best possible outcome? If the AGI is much smarter than what we are, how do we want society to look like? Because at the end of the day, we don't, human beings, even if we think we aspire to a life without friction and a life without problems, actually, it is the journey towards that goal that is the reward, not the goal itself. Because once you have reached a goal like that, all you are doing is you are entering the next race, which is trying to find the next goal. So, example, you study to become a doctor for 5 years, and sleepless nights, no money, living cheap, it's hell every day, torture, and then you're working towards this big goal to call yourself a doctor. And what happens when you reach that goal? Everyone celebrates you. You are at the top of the hill. You have now become a doctor. You are now an incredible success story. And what an achievement. And then the next day, you go work at McDonald's. Because now you have started the next race, right? And that's the career race. Now you start at the bottom again. And so the point is, it is never about the finish line. It is always about the journey. Yes, that's it.
No, but it is. I think us as people, I think it's human nature to not be content. Yes. And if you talk about utopia, it's just constant stream of contention. I mean, you can talk about yin and yang, the balance of good and bad in life and so on. And without the bad, you can't appreciate the good. And if everything is good all the time, you're gonna create.
Screw balance, man. People say you should live a balanced life. I say fuck living a balanced life. you should live a life of contrast.
Of contrast.
Yes,
yeah.
that's what you should do. You should
That's
live a life of contrast.
You should keep that as a soundbite.
It was my girlfriend who taught me that, by the way. I'm taking all the credit myself. She has the curly. But yeah, so we want to talk about Sam Altman, right? So OpenAI's CEO, massive.
I want to try and bring this. Into a gaming sphere. Because we can talk about Utopia, and when we talk about Utopia and we talk about Sam Altman, we can talk about AI. I know what happened with OpenAI, and I don't know how much you know, but I love exploring that. We can talk about where our society is moving, and our industry, and our end consumer in our industry. Like, how does that affect our end consumer? And AI falls part of that, and AGI. So let's do the Sam Altman anecdote first, like the story of OpenAI, and then I'd want to, like, at least so we pay homage to our list of potential topics. Talk about, how does the next 5 years look like with this technology and so on for our industry and for our people. So, how much do you know about what happened to OpenAI? Did you do a deep dive on this?
So the overhanging story is that OpenAI, obviously Sam Altman is the big public CEO. He was the founder of OpenAI. He led the company to greatness. That led to the launch of ChatGPT, culminating into the massive growth of OpenAI. And then one day, from nowhere, you're fired, Sam Altman.
Over Google Meet.
And at some point, I think the CEO of Betsson Group, Pontus Lindvall, probably called Sam Altman and tell, "Listen, Sam, I've been in your shoes. Listen to what you do." And he managed, then after a couple of days, to get himself back as the CEO. Board was fired. The whole company obviously rallied behind Sam Altman. Microsoft rallied behind Sam Altman. He reinstated himself. But what is the deeper story here?
All right, so
what is conspiracy?
No, I mean, it's just because, I'll give you some context that is interesting, because I went a bit on a deep dive. So, first of all, OpenAI is not built like other companies. It started as a non-profit, right? Did you know that it's right now classified as capped profit company?
Right. So it is the company entity itself is non-profit, but they have taken investment into the company, and these investors, like Microsoft, for example, they are capped into making a maximum of 10x return.
Yeah.
So it's kind of part for profit, part.
So if you look at the organizational structure, you have the original Elon Musk co-founded non-profit organization, which has the control of the board you're talking about.
Yeah.
That owns the holding company. And the holding company has the shares to some investors and employees, and there's like a side company there, and that controls the OpenAI capped profit company. Microsoft invested there. You have some other investors and some employees on there. But because of its structure, the board of directors has the control over the OpenAI ChatGPT, the company you pay the subscription to. So it's not like a classical company where the board of directors of the for-profit business controls the business. It's actually the board of the NGO that controls the business. The reason why that was set up was to make sure that the AGI and that we do, how do we call it? Diligent, cautious approach to creating, not create the plot for Terminator, basically. No Skynet for us. No Skynet for us. So what happened actually? Ilya, the chief science officer, and Sam Altman have been parting ways for a while, which is something I found out recently. Okay, Sam and Mira, the CTO, wanted to move more towards revenue-driven structure so they can raise more money for more projects, and they wanted to push toward the AGI with Microsoft backing them and so on. And there was a split of opinion between Ilya and the board and Sam Altman's direction. In September, October, Sam sets up No, actually, as early as March, May. I can't remember exactly now, timing of this year. But earlier this year, Sam sets up the board, the new science team, which was made up of people from the lingual model division, which is your chat GTP, and the mathematical model division. So one thing that current AI can't do is solve really complex mathematical logical problems, because you can only have one outcome. So the merger of the linguistic model and the mathematical model is assumed to be the first general intelligence. So he sets up this team of super intelligent scientists. I think the team was actually called super intelligence scientists, something like that. Like, you should Google it. Like, it's literally
cartoon villainish.
Mate, like, no, genuinely, it was called something like that, something super intelligent. And Ilya was against it. It would appear, and Sam in October made a move to limit Ilya's power on that team. So this is all now coming out as people are speaking up, and newspapers are trying to poke at the information and whatnot. So apparently, OpenAI was working on QStar, which is some form of, so what we think so far. So none of this is like confirmed, but let's say down the grapevine, the gossip is. The gossip, like I'm there. The web gossip is that Q2 created a mathematical breakthrough, right? And that is crucial to general intelligence, because it can only have one outcome, where a model will solve mathematical puzzles, create conclusions, use those conclusions to create new problems, and so on, and create solutions in very complex mathematical problems. So far, we're not there. So linguistic model is great because it pulls on a lot of information, it processes it and spits it back out, but math, not so much. So apparently there was a massive breakthrough there in this QStar division. And Sam also went on just before he was ousted on a San Diego, Silicon Valley. There was a big OpenAI, one of those hackathon seminars, whichever, where he introduced the little ChatGPT bots.
Yeah.
And all the ways, he was saying that something big is coming, and that we're going to give ChatGPT bots autonomy, and they can do the jobs on your behalf, and so on and so forth. And he really took it far. That was not apparently what OpenAI board agreed that will be presented to the world. So he took his own direction, and it's been cooking for some time. So you have Ilya, who is now like pissed, and he's going, this guy is ostracizing me, and I really don't feel that we should be going in this for-profit direction. You have Sam and Mira, who are apparently going, we should raise more money because that will allow us more tech. We should go for selling shares at 80-something billion valuation. And the board was already getting tired of Sam because he had side projects, and he's been doing side projects. So he started with the WorldCoin. You remember WorldCoin? I didn't know that was Sam.
What was it called?
WorldCoin.
No, it was
No?
not.
So Sam, earlier this year, for sure you saw the news about it, man, because I thought this is it, like this is the end of days. So Sam co-founded WorldCoin, which is a crypto coin, which is supposed to give you universal basic income as a mitigation factor of AI taking people's jobs away.
All right.
And the way you would get, everybody got 50 coins, which were worth like €2, if you scan your eye retina. You don't remember that?
Oh my God, no, I missed it completely.
Google it, WorldCoin. So that's Sam Altman. So people went around. Literally, there were these like iStore kind of. It looks like the ball of Hal. Yeah, you know Hal from Odyssey 2001.
Yeah, the red.
The evil AI.
Yeah.
That's how it looked like. And then people were waiting in line around the block, and they were coming up and scanning their retinas to get like 50 WorldCoins, which was worth like $2 or something. It was super small, right? So he co-founds this project, which the board calls Sam's side projects. Then he goes to the Middle East, to the royal families of Saudis and so on, and he wanted to raise tens of millions to compete with Nvidia, to create AI chips. That was his personal pet project as well. And that had nothing to do with OpenAI. So the board was thinking, like, you are too distracted for the board, and what you're doing is pretty aggressive. And then the last one, he pairs up with Apple and somebody else, I forgot, an Apple engineer, and he creates the AI hardware pin.
Right.
I think it's called the pin. So culmination of his side projects, the fact that the employees wrote a letter saying, hey, we discovered there's a project that can possibly endanger humanity. A couple of employees wrote, according to the Reuters report that came out after the Sam's firing. People wrote to the board. Some employees, concerned employees, wrote to the board saying that we've made a breakthrough in general intelligence that can threaten humanity, and we need to slow this down. Microsoft really wants AGI, so they want to integrate AGI. They're fully supporting Sam. Sam wants AGI. CTO wants AGI, and there is a faction of people going, Skynet, chill the fuck out, right? So I think the board played it in, I don't know what kind of motivations were there. I honestly thought it was maybe Microsoft sabotaging so they can take OpenAI, but that's not what happened. Yeah. But the board fires Sam over a Google Meets call, even though they're like Microsoft funded company.
In Google Meets.
Yeah, Google
rather
Meets.
Than Microsoft
Teams, right?
And the meme is that Sam Altman lasted 1 day with Microsoft Teams, and then he returned to OpenAI and Google Meet again.
Yeah. So Elon Musk took the pisses as always. Like he took a jab. He said now they can maybe use Meet if they move to Microsoft. They'll have to use Microsoft Teams. So the board over with Ilya ousts Sam over Google Meets, and then you have a story. Sam goes to Microsoft. Microsoft is ready to collect them to continue the project, and so on. And people just stood up in protest, and Sam comes back leading OpenAI. But now that begs the question. Like, Sam and Ilya have to continue working together. So now there's a massive conflict inside that company. Yep. So we're not seeing what the fallout is, but there was a very, very public split for some reason, which apparently is an invention of AGI or getting dangerously close to an AGI. And now the doors have been closed and everything's fine. Yep. But this is where I start thinking, okay, we're probably much closer to AGI than we think. We're probably there at the doorstep because nobody expected ChatGPT to come out swinging like that. No. Nobody expected that. I mean, we had, a year ago on, I think it was on Sigma maybe, we had Angelo Dalli's Umnai painting a picture of a horse that didn't look like a horse. But it's true, no, right? Yeah. It was just like scribble. I'm like, okay, so, and I thought, all right, it is like AI 15 years from now, maybe something happens. And then within 12 months, you have Mid-Journey throwing out photoreal. I mean, today I was browsing, and on YouTube, there's Elon Musk. And mate, it's Elon. It is Elon. It is every wrinkle. It is every facial expression. It is Elon on a stage pushing Quantum AI, his new project that will do automated forex trading for you.
So it's a fake ad with
completely,
Elon Musk.
But may I rewind? Hi, I went in. Can I zoom in screenshots? I'm like, this is incredible. Like, did they film him and then just change the lips? Yeah. Did they? Like, I went back and forth, man. I spent like 5 minutes and I was like, this is Elon. This is so precise. Yeah. It's insane. And I wouldn't recognize it. I just know it's fake because Elon Musk isn't going to push a forex trading platform.
That's the giveaway, yes.
But how many people are not there and they're going, oh, Elon Musk, forex trading, make money for you, right? So you have this incredible advancement that nobody expected, nobody, and we're supposed to believe that we're still far away from AGI. I don't think so. I think it's there.
And to your point, I watched the dev day of OpenAI as well when a week before Sam Altman got fired and then reinstated. And in the dev day, as you point out, they talked about the incredible, exciting things that are coming next year. And he closed that OpenAI day by saying, if you would know what we are working on right now, what you have seen today, what we are announcing today, will seem like child play to what we will be announcing next year. And can you then imagine, in that in the presentation, they talk about the emergence of agents, the AI agents. So what we have seen this year with ChatGPT is basically you ask the entity a question and you get an answer. So it's question answer. It's like you are sitting with one person that knows everything, and this person will give you an answer. And then the next concept is the concept of agents, which you can imagine that you're sitting with a team of people, and you're giving this team of people a task, and this team of people or this team of agents will talk to each other. And it will go deeper into this task that you're giving it. So you can imagine that you go to a marketing agency and you tell them, I have €1 million and I want to come up with a great business idea based here in Malta. I want to open a restaurant or something like that. Can you put together the entire project for me? And then in this meeting, you will have someone who is an expert in the financials, who will be able to put together a budget.
Plan,
a creative person who will be able to come up with a brand and a marketing plan. You'll have a designer in there who will be able to produce the design, so on and so forth. And it's a similar concept in the concept of AI agents. It will basically break up your one question into 50 questions.
It will decompose. It will decompose the task into a brief.
Yeah. So ChatGPT, you ask it, I want to start a restaurant in Malta. Can you give me some recommendations? And it will answer people like Chinese food, and you should probably start a Chinese restaurant. But when you ask this to the future of ChatGPT, which will be agent based, it will basically take this question, break it up into 50 questions. Questions like, what type of restaurant will generate the most revenue? Where in Malta is the best location for a restaurant? What type of design speaks most to people, and so on and so forth. And it will break this up into 50 questions. Yeah. It will do its research on this 50 questions, and then it will basically aggregate all these 50 answers back into a full, basically, business plan. Yeah. And just like a marketing agency would do. They would designate 10 people to solve 10 different questions, and then they would put it all together into one brief that is being delivered to you. And that is the next breakthrough in
which
AI,
is
basically.
Apparently child's play.
Yeah, which is so this is what they talked about is coming, and they are they're talking about even with that in mind, what is being worked on in the background, what we'll be announcing on this date next year is going to seem like it's going to make this year's announcement like child's play.
So I think he had to do that, the bots, because there were already conversations by very smart people going, internet doesn't make money, it's what you build on its building blocks that makes money. And there was a whole industry growing of prompt designers, and you can purchase prompts, and you can purchase with an API plugins that they released. People are starting to build bots and paying OpenAI per prompt, and you had companies creating specialized bots for Forex, for marketing, for legal, for this, for that. And I think they've looked at that and said, let's just do that. We can do this better. We can create agents. And they just shut down an entire secondary industry that was built on their infrastructure and delivered it directly to the customer. And I think they've done that because they will control the input of information, and they will have access to direct input information and direct requests firsthand, which is what they need in order to feed AI, right? So if they create a separation where all the inputs are happening on a third-party element, and then that third-party bot is processing information and then requesting certain things from OpenAI, I think that they will distance themselves from the collective information source of the people themselves to some degree.
Yeah.
So I think he made a conscious choice in saying, okay, I'm going to shut down a marketplace, basically. I'm going to create my own marketplace that I control, my own app store. And if that is just scratching the surface.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. So, talk about gambling.
So I can relate it a little bit, because what I'm really curious is to try to understand at what level do organizations in the AGI industry, for example, take AI seriously. So I think there is a general sense that we are heading towards a revolution to some extent. It's hard to grasp, it's hard to figure out, it's moving so quickly, so it's kind of like, when do you enter? Do you build proprietary solutions? Do you look for tools that emerge and so on? But I've been really curious to understand what are companies doing today.
I can tell you what we do.
Let's do that. But before, I was having a really interesting conversation with someone from Enthusiast, which is a development company, and they specialize in AI solutions for organizations. So basically, if I as an organization want to figure out how to optimize my AI system, whatever, I can go to Enthusiast.
There's a company that specializes in AI solutions for corporations.
Yeah.
That company had to be created in the last 12 months with
I
its
think
specific purpose.
They are pivoting.
But you know what I mean?
Yeah,
it's a whole industry being created.
Yeah, exactly. Because now everyone wants to figure out AI. Right. And so we asked them, what because obviously they are trying to sell their services and pitch this to companies. And I asked, what is the response? Like, where are companies right now? And he said, Roman is his name. And he said that, it's funny because bigger companies tend to not really be bothered. They are doing their thing. It's very difficult. They are big moving companies. They don't really want to change their strategies and so on. Whereas the smaller a company gets, the more receptive they are to utilizing this new technology, to use it as a means to get ahead of their competition and so on. And that seems to be the general kind of consensus there, that smaller companies, yes, bigger companies are not really moving. And isn't that like proof that we are like going through an inflection point right now where eventually these companies that are small today, by getting on the bicycle very early, they eventually will have a massive advantage against these like big, slow-moving companies?
I'm sure about it. I'm certain about it. That eventually, there's always a story of Netflix versus Blockbuster, which is we always go back to that. Where the dinosaur typically the dinosaur falls unless they adapt.
Yeah.
But, and there's a massive but. Yes, large firm bureaucracy will play its role. And it's hard to change a large firm bureaucracy. But bureaucracy is there for a good reason. Those processes and procedures and policies need to protect stupid decisions and stupid decision making and some employees not seeing the big picture. So do you know that Samsung, I think it's Samsung, maybe I have to Google this. Do you know that Samsung blocked access to OpenAI?
For their in their devices, so like regular users cannot.
Employees,
yeah, because you're putting in very sensitive information, kind of thing. That's the reason.
Yeah, not only that
because people are inputting like company secrets and like really really sensitive detailed information to ask ChatGPT contracts that they want to analyze.
Samsung employees reported they are leaking sensitive data via OpenAI's chatbot, which presents timely lesson. They were taking snippets of Samsung new OS code and asking OpenAI to reevaluate it, and proprietary IP information.
Right. Incredible.
Like literally. Like all of their books, like everything was exposed, and Samsung, I think it was Samsung, I'm pretty sure, they literally leaked like proprietary information. So once it was out, and now there's like the Samsung's next OS that is planned for 2024, and some other information is now in the database of OpenAI, and they had this an emergency shutdown where like OpenAI IP was blocked and so on. So you have two sides of that coin, right? Large companies are slower moving because if it works, don't break it, and that's general consensus. It's always healthy to have that R&D department, that kind of gives you the new technologies. But I've experienced it working in large companies. It was painfully slow to make big motion. I think we all have. And on the flip side, they do have to take care of, they have to look into it from a different perspective. Evolution is not going to have the same freedoms as TrueLABs, as TrueLAB games. It just won't. They have shareholders to answer to and so on and so forth, and they have like 50,000 employees. I have 50.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? So there is some sense to that, and there will be small companies that are just stratospheric in their growth.
TrueLABs.
Right.
Yes.
And they will capitalize on the opportunity of change, and then you will have some giants that will be open to adaptation. They will integrate adaptive mechanisms in their massive organization, and they will move slower, but they will move nonetheless. And then I have companies that will just not be, that will not cut it with the times, and that's always going to be the case.
Yeah.
In our case, man, there's nothing we don't do with AI anymore. There's nothing we don't do. I do sound production. I have one guy now we used to hire companies for voiceovers and so on. Now, if I release Guns, Love and Therapy 2, and I had those funny voiceovers going, get in there and, be your daddy and all those funny ones that I had to find. I had to go through so many actors to find the right actor for the right role. Now, I record them, my connotations. I record them literally going, this is how I want it to sound, but make it Morgan Freeman.
All right.
And it's done. And it's a really high quality audio file. It's done. And my guy on Ableton is he will write the background tune, and I'll say, I want something that sounds like Interstellar, because I love Interstellar, and we're doing like the spaceship game soon, like this. So on, and we'll take some version of that melody, and then we'll say, we want to make it Hans Zimmer, and I want it as a orchestra, and so on, and I want it as a 30-second emotional flow, and it will just write.
Dude, can you include Matthew McConaughey when you make a big win? All right.
Yeah, you probably can. And that's the beauty of it. Like, so far, you're not even able to. You can use people's voices, because we even investigated that. Like, is it legal to make someone sound like?
Because it raises a lot of IP questions there, right?
But I could also hire a guy that can mimic a voice, and I could hire that guy, right? Who will sound like Matthew McConaughey, because that's his bread and butter, and that's completely legit.
Yeah.
So there's Israel is, for example, doing like a lot of IP rights about that, because I was interviewing someone from there. There is a big momentum on how do you process stable diffusion, because stable diffusion graphically is fed from proprietary information. So the output of AI is built on the back of a lot of proprietary information. So now there are laws being put forward that are trying to manage that, but I don't know how far we are from that. We do everything like literally. I'll do game concepts now in one day, whereas it took me 3-4 days to sketch them and so on. Now it's just come in this style, that style. There's a software called Magnify.ai. Was it Magnify? There's so many now that I use. Yeah. It will take any mid-journey image and it will blow it up to 4K. It's even if you took a blurry photo, and you're not really happy with the photo, but it's like the photo of the Roman Colosseum or something, and you say, blow it up for me, it will clear it up. It's gonna look incredible, like to the droplets of water on a leaf, Crazy. Yeah.
So has this lowered the cost as well? Like, what was the kind of average cost to produce a game before, and has it lowered it to
depends.
Produce a game now?
Costs are definitely lower. It does lower it. It takes time to. So we went through 3 stages so far. There was a resistance by it. We lost artists over this. We've lost stuff. I specifically, I had one good girl that I really wanted to keep, but I think she was terrified for her job, and AI made a character that was cooler. It just was.
Yeah.
The expression was there, the exact smirk. We explained how he needs to be. It's the Riff Reactor game, and the guy was supposed to be this cross between Back to the Future scientist and Rick and Morty and Rick, right? And we explained the expression and so on, and it just made it, man, with the goggles and so on. And this girl spent 3 days sketching her, and she couldn't get the expression right. She could, and we said, let's just, let's copy, like, this is good. Let's just make it, upscale it. Let's put it into Spine and so on. She didn't quote that the reason for leaving, but within 5 days she handed in her resignation. There was a very angry message going, I don't know why we're doing these emotionless, and me and the product guys were laughing, snickering, kind of going, man, this is the opposite of emotionless. That's why we're choosing it, because it had exactly the right emotion we're looking for. I was like, why are we using these emotionless, blah, blah, this and that? 4 days later, I get a letter of resignation. It was incredible. And I really liked her work. Yeah. So there was a period of resistance where I think people and companies will experience this. People in general need to realize that this is a tool to be used and to integrate. And if you don't fall in line, you will be left behind. That's right. Number one. And now we broke through that wall. We had to give them a lot of Udemy courses and bad courses, good courses, and so on. And now we have artists and sound engineers really, utilizing it. And there's still there's still a period of adaptation where we're still redrawing things and so on. Soon, I think the cost will be probably a fraction. We're talking about fractional, 25%, 20% of what the game used to cost. Yeah. So yeah, very good tools.
Does that lead then to? The industry has an issue to some extent, I suppose, where the proliferation of massive amount of games that are being produced on a week-to-week, month-to-month basis by so many studios. Does this feed into that proliferation of even more games now? Like, say, you can draw some comparisons to just general content production on the internet that through the use of GPT and APIs, you can automate content production and produce an infinite amount of articles. Yeah. So in a world like that, how do affiliates survive? Basically, when an infinite amount of affiliates can produce an infinite amount of content, how do you stand out in that? And same for you and in the game sphere, like how do you stand out in a world like that where we probably will see an explosion on top of an explosion of new games?
Like you will, but it's market dictates, man. It's the consumer's choice. So if you're going to give a consumer 50,000 copies of the same Book of Ra or Book of the Dead and so on, eventually they're going to spin a few spins and going to move away. It might be cheap production, you might be spoiled for choice, but the market solves itself. Like you already have many casinos going. I want, like, big casinos choose games which they're going to deploy, which ones not. So you have to build relationships with casino managers. You have to prove to them that your game is going to be sticky, because a site has a limited amount of real estate on its homepage. And yeah, you can be pragmatic. You can. Shout out to Dave. You can be pragmatic and you can completely flood the market with influencers and game promotion and so on, and just literally capitalize on that market. Absolutely. But, you have that once in a blue moon kind of stratospheric growth. Most other companies compete for their market share on a very limited space of an operator page. And game copies are not going to fly. So yes, your production value has cheapened, and you are able to produce cool graphics and cool sounds and produce assets easier. But ultimately, you still need to be original in your mechanics approach. You still need to be original in your dynamic. You need to be original in like what makes a player tick. And yeah, I think we're going to see a flood. I think that will happen. And then we're going to see a culling, and that will happen. And eventually it's just going to find its space.
Do you think there's a risk that it will become a race to the bottom, where?
For sure, but it always is. Like there's a race to the bottom, then there's a culling, right?
Yeah.
And then there's a race back to the top where AI is a tool set to originality. It's not a replacement of an original thought. Yeah. I'm certain of it, though. It's just very natural progression of things.
Yeah. Speaking about the industry, as we are on this topic now, we talked about the trend that is becoming more evident of the industry, where companies, operators, especially major traditional tier 1 operators, are moving more towards regulated markets, and they are looking to become kind of whiter than white. Let's say they prefer to earn most of their, if not all of their revenue from highly regulated markets, whereas tier 2 and tier 3 operators and kind of the new wave of crypto operators are moving more towards the gray and the unregulated space. There's like a polarization that is taking place, and it's very difficult to find yourself in the middle. It seems to be that operators are seeking themselves to one strategy or the other. Do you see that trend as well? And what do you make of this? What will this lead to down the line?
Market controls, like the beauty of capitalism, right? Market dictates and consumer dictates. So there is a polarization and there is a movement of the market toward the black, right? And we see this regularly. Crypto casinos are on the rise, unregulated casinos are on the rise, and players are choosing to play on unregulated casinos. They're not afraid. Before it used to be, don't play on uncertified casinos, because what if you don't have your money? What if they don't pay you? Today, look at the quality of the crypto casino product. Instant withdrawals, which actually, ironically, so people say crypto casinos don't have as many costs as regulated casinos. I can't say with certainty that's true, because with the speed of the withdrawal processing and the whole point of blockchain-based transactional mechanisms in and out without SEPA withdrawal checks and so on, there is an accumulated percentage of money that leaks to fraud, which crypto casinos have to account for as business cost expense. And you can swap that out with tax. Yeah. It's like it's their version of tax. So if you look at the quality of product, you have fast deposits, fast withdrawals. You have as that affiliate guy on the article said, better bonus offers, affiliates are treated better, just generally better ecosystem, and players feel safe. So why are they gravitating to these unlicensed casinos who obviously have a equal, if not superior product? There should be no reason to, right? Like, think about it. Human being is lazy in nature, right? So, what would force you to figure out what USDT is versus USD or versus Euro, and what Bitcoin is or Ethereum, and then go and open a wallet and then connect the wallet and figure out how to connect the wallet to this thing? Yeah. It's not, right? And you can say, oh, it's money laundering and it's all criminal. Mate, most players are not criminals. Like, it's just not, They lose money against the game. It's not P2P gambling where I transfer money to you, and there's some sort of transactional, unregulated transactional process. I'm sure there's a part of that, but ultimately, if we talk about casino games, it's against the house, So what would make players gravitate toward a more complex solution they have to become accustomed to? And the reality of it is that their solution and the regulators enforcing the solution in the regulated market isn't listening to the market itself. It's like trying to protect people from themselves. And to some extent that's healthy, but to another extent nobody wants a big brother in their home. Like nobody wants that. And if players do choose to play slots or play live games and so on at a certain speed, at a certain bet size, within reason. So I'm not saying that there is no space for responsible gambling regulation. That's not what I'm saying. But if regulation, like in Germany, is saying, I think this was Germany, right? Or possibly Colombia, Spain, that a slot spin has to last 5 seconds.
Yeah.
You know,
what are your options?
What are your options?
Yeah.
Like I'm not going to experience this. It's against the product value itself. So it doesn't fit the product. I might as well ban it, right? So then the market is going to gravitate to the customer is going to gravitate to the market that offers them the product that serves their purpose. So if we take a look at what the regulators, EU specifically, I'm not talking about American regulators,
exactly.
EU regulators in specific, what they're doing. We're talking about unknowledgeable, I think that's the word, ignorant.
Ignorant, yes.
Ignorant. I wanted to not be rude. Yeah. We're talking about ignorant career politicians, administrators, middle management, government workers, creating policies and reactions that are not there to serve the consumer. They are there to create an image of protection for the general population. So you look at UKGC, and that's a regulatory failure in every possible aspect of fairness of the market or fair market approach. They have created duopolies and monopolies in the market. Maybe that was by design. Maybe that was by literally corrupt lobbying. I'm not saying Quentin and whoever, I'm not saying you've done that, but maybe lobbying was done by design to remove the competitive advantage of smaller and medium businesses and leave a couple of giants monopolizing the UK market. And what do you get? You get these enormous, almost irrational fines, fear-mongering of operators, where operators are saying it's just not worth going into UK. I'm not going to get fined 5 million euros for misplacing a letter on an advert, And you have these overzealous player protection mechanisms that don't really serve the player, right? But they create this image of this is how we're protecting you for this general audience. And this is how much we raised in taxes, and this is how much we got from the gambling thing, and we're going to get that into pay that into schools. It's showmanship. It's a stage. It's a political stage. And unfortunately, at EU level, our governments have aged enough and are bureaucratic enough for that stage to really proliferate. And ultimately, there was a detachment of end consumer from their product. And over-regulation has pushed the consumer into a gray zone, which shouldn't be as easy to get into, or it shouldn't grow as fast as it's growing. And we're seeing revenues increasing on casinos that do have licenses and so on, but they allow crypto payments and so on. And you have Financial Times expose on stake.com. It came out on Eddie, who's a brilliant mind, by the way. I think Eddie's like 27, 28 years old. The guy's a genius, absolute genius.
Eddie Craven is the founder of Stake, basically.
Yeah, thank you for clarification's sake.
Yes.
So Financial Times did an expose on them, and they interviewed one of the Stake employees, and they were like, we were seeing people gambling, Bitcoin gambling, so on. So there's allowance of these VIPs to experience gambling the way they want to experience it, without having to justify whether they can afford the Bitcoin or whether they can afford this. And again, I'm not saying
pay slips.
Again, I'm not saying that there's no space for that, but to the level of source of funds and so on are demanded now, and the KYC is demanded now. It just makes people uncomfortable that they have a big brother in their house so deeply. So it moves to a grey. And we've seen that momentum. And obviously, as a supplier of the industry, you follow the customer. You're going to follow the customer. So market dictates its momentum. And you don't see that in the US. Bedrock of capitalism.
Why do you think that is, that we're seeing over-regulation specifically in Europe, whereas in the US, the regulators in the individual states seems to have taken a much more kind of reasonable approach to...
It's a very simple example. I mean, if you think, logic it out. It's a bedrock of capitalism. Money speaks. which it's what the US was founded on. It was founded on two things: freedom for pursuit of happiness, right? Personal freedoms, and market dictates motion. So the players get to dictate what they want to do and what they want to play, and there is a cultural aversion to Big Brother influence. So if you look at the consumer culture that grew up with Vegas and NIGA and the Native American Gaming Association, for the belt, how do you call it? Central America, not Central America, but Central US, Midwest. And then you have your Vegas for Californians, and you have your Atlantic City, I think, is for
East Coast, New York.
New York. So you had these gambling hubs, and if people want to gamble, they travel to these designated areas, and it's part of the culture. And I'm free to do what the fuck I want to do, right? And you can't take that away from me. So there is this cultural infrastructure of leave me my freedoms to me to decide what's best for me. And then, of course, there's a massive lobbying system in play where lobbyists dictate how the market should be regulated, which, if we're talking about big pharma, I'm really against that. But in some industries, it's sensible to have that healthy approach. We don't have that in Europe. We have career politicians that decide on things that they don't know much about. So I think that's the movement.
And to summarize, the American Gaming Association in North America is a very powerful political lobbying organization and lobby group. And in the 2000s, the American Gaming Association was a land-based only organization with Sheldon Adelson, who was the founder of Sands. God rest his soul. He passed away a couple of years ago. But Sheldon Adelson was this highly political and polarized figure who was the biggest individual donor to Donald Trump. And this is the founder of Sands, right? And in the heart of AGI in the 2000s was Sheldon Adelson and some of the others founders of major casinos in Vegas who were lobbying against the proliferation of online gambling. And in the 2000s, it was targeting online poker specifically. And I don't know if you remember, was it 2008? That UAGA happened, which was basically
2006.
It was basically Sheldon Adelson and American Gaming Association's lobby push to ban any form of online gambling at that time. So from one night to the other, what happened was at that time that online gambling operations ceased to become legal. What they did is they made it illegal for banks to allow transfers of money into online casinos. At that time, there was no Bitcoin,
so they could pinch casino owners of money laundering, which is a lot more heavier,
much more severe. So what happened at that time, 2008, is many of the established poker sites, they closed the US market, except for Full Tilt, Absolute Poker, Bodog, and a couple of others that basically defied this law and decided we're gonna operate in the US anyway. Right? The volumes were just huge at that time. So PokerStars, for example, they pulled from the US market when UAGA happened, and continued to Party Poker and the result of this, obviously, is that a lot of players, they migrated into Full Tilt, for example, that then continued to operate the US, and that's where the fish was, so that's where the players migrated. Party Poker lost their status forever as one of the leading poker networks at that time. I think now they've been in an upturn again, but for many years, Party Poker became quite irrelevant.
They lost their liquidity.
Based on UAGA. Lo and behold, a couple of years later, you don't want to go behind the back of the US government. The hammer is going to come down. And 2012, there was the day known as the Black Friday, where players visited Full Tilt, Absolute Poker, other operators, and they were met with an FBI has seized the servers page, not able to access their player accounts, not able to access their funds, so on and so forth. The point being here is that there is so strong lobbying efforts in the US that is led by the American Gaming Association. So later on, of course, through the pandemic and after the repeal of PASPA in 2018, after the death of Sheldon Adelson, the American Gaming Association did a 180 turn and accepted online gambling and have kind of led the lobbying efforts.
Within their financial structure, though.
Yep.
You look at the amount of influence and partnerships. I think Entain partnered up with MGM, did it?
Yeah, exactly.
You have huge amounts of land-based. So what I like it's such
became inevitable.
Love-hate relationship between me and America.
And especially after Sheldon Adelson's, because he was the big opponent to online. He saw online as a threat.
Yeah.
He wants to keep the status quo and don't take any risk, keep doing what we're doing and keep gambling to the land-based sector. But something interesting came out of UA.
Can't fight progress.
Something really interesting came out of UA game, because when that ban happened, the fantasy sports sector, who also have a lobbying organization behind them, they wanted to make sure that their industry was safeguarded from the ban of online gambling. They argued that fantasy sports is a skill-based activity, and which it is as well, fantasy sports. And so they wanted to make sure that in this bill it's clarified that fantasy sports is excluded from this ban that is related to. So in the UEGA law, so that point it specifically says that fantasy sports is excluded from this ban. What happens? Like, people are brilliant, you know. So founder of FanDuel, he realized that there's a loophole here to be explored, and the birth of daily fantasy sports, which is essentially sports betting.
Yeah.
It's identical to sports betting. It's sports betting tournaments that we're talking about here.
Literally. You
are putting together and drafting your team, placing bets on it, you enter a tournament, and then you watch the game and hoping that your team will win. It is gambling sports betting. And that became a loophole that came from UEGA. And many of the former professional poker players migrated into becoming professional daily fantasy sports players. Which then led to this huge wave of FanDuel and DraftKings just pumping in money into the market, building the databases, building the ecosystem around daily fantasy sports, which they then eventually used to convert those players into the online environment. So actually, Jason Robbins has very much Sheldon Adelson to thank for his online gambling imperium, which was not the intended cause for this initial thing.
Hey, opportunistic behavior, opportunism pays. You know, seeing opportunity, capitalizing on it, moving fast.
Yep.
Those are traits of success. So you know, hats off to him.
So you know, now we've it feels like the industry has gone full circle in a sense where you know, the biggest casinos in the world today online are crypto casinos. You could probably argue.
You could argue that.
Yes, the 1xBets, the stakes.
You could argue that monthly take of crypto casinos surpasses regulated business conglomerates. You could argue that.
So, where will all this lead? Like, is there where will all this lead? It feels like we are back in 2005.
I honestly, I really don't see a clean exit here. I can't,
because crypto can't be regulated as such.
It will be though.
I mean, you can create friction, but players have already proven that they are willing to learn how to navigate the friction, right? Because it's, as you pointed out earlier, how do you learn how to, you know, plug in a MetaMask and deposit money and go through all these hoops and so on, and people are willing to do it.
I mean, look.
Once you're in the ecosystem,
so you have two things that are happening. First of all, the baby boomers are dying off. Fact. So the age group of wealth, even though 65-year plus still hold 50% of the world wealth and all of that, there's a movement of more tech-savvy people that are now in their millennials and in their 40s, man, for Christ's sake, 30s and 40s, and that's only going to move forward, move more in that direction. So you're going to have tech-savvy people that are the primary earners, number one. Two, that gives them easy access to crypto or any new technology they need to use to do what they want to do. Secondly, you have this deafness toward what the customer is looking for, at least on the EU stage, which is causing this disparagement. Because keep in mind something that I want to add to, as you were saying, gambling in US grew, but it grew through partnerships with European online-based businesses. So what American companies did is they took the experience of Europe. Okay, you've been doing this for 15 years. Come partner up with us and so on. We're going to use your knowledge and we're going to deliver that product to our market under our terms. I also question how much of the regulatory behavior, like the culture, the regulated market culture, how much of that is going to carry over on anti-money laundering, KYC, source of funds, and so on in the US market. But I guess what I'm getting at is that the operators, regulated operators, are moving away through the force of regulation from what the end consumer needs. And I don't see us reversing that. So if you were to create a project now and say, okay, let's make EU market, right? So rather than opening new markets, let's take a look at the market that kind of grew over the last 15 years. How would you make it really appealing to the player again? You know, the Germany, the Netherlands, the Sweden, the Norway, all of the local markets, UK. Well, you'd need a really powerful lobbying entity made up of all the operators that are going to negotiate with each state, each government individually, and we don't have such a strong federal system like the US does, where if you have federal support, it's easy to open up individual states, right? We don't have that, where EU is completely differently structured. And we don't also have these powerful lobbying bodies that are able to influence individual markets, because the markets are individual. So you can't repeat the success or quasi-success of US on the European market. You are going to have this huge buyer's market moving toward crypto, and you're going to, what I see is you're going to have a larger and larger divide. So the question is now, how dystopian do I want my predictions to go? Because if I look at Turkey as a market that didn't manage to ban, so they banned the banks transferring, then they banned obviously they banned the companies, then they banned the banks, not allowing the 7995 code for gambling to be processed, and then they banned the IPs, and then eventually they were announcing to the Turkish players that if you are caught gambling online, you will go to prison, get arrested, or have some criminal proceedings. So the next step, and I'm not saying that's going to happen, because I think EU, like, that has to be really dystopian to go that way. But if you can't stop players gambling through the means of blocking supply, and through the means of blocking transfers, and through the means of catching out these companies registered in Andorjan and registered here and there, Bahamas and so on and so forth, then your next natural step is to say, well, if you're gonna gamble, right, that's a criminal enterprise. If you're gonna gamble on a legal site, only state-owned or state-regulated sites are legal to gamble on. And I don't think we're gonna go there, like by force, but may introduce as a ending of this maybe ending. I don't know. We can go on forever. But I introduce another element to our podcast and say, okay, if they can't force customers to choose regulated market gambling, then and there's still a large amount of fiat transactions happening on crypto casinos as well. Keep that in mind. So it's not all crypto. There's a lot of fiat transactions, which technically are legal and so on and so forth, happening on crypto casinos. Then if EU is going to introduce the digital currency of the central bank, which in very broad strokes is government-owned Bitcoin. So there's I've sent you a link. You have to watch it. Yeah. Can I just digress for a second? Somebody, please Google this. So there is the president of the Central Bank of Europe. Okay. On the 23rd of March, 2023, she was a victim of a prank call. Okay. Her name is Caroline. I forgot the surname. Hold on.
Van der Leyen?
No. She's the Ursula is the president of EU. But the president of the central bank, Christine Lagarde. Christine Lagarde. She's the president of the European Central Bank. Okay, she's like powerless for the Fed. Okay, so she gets scammed by these Ukrainian pranksters who pretended to be Zelensky. Do you know this? Do you know?
No,
oh my god! Oh my god! So they pretend they are Zelensky. So they sounded. Man, I wish we could play this. So they sounded like Zelensky. Yeah. So you know how he speaks. If you cannot give us credit, give us money, give us credit, and we will pay you back later, right? so this guy sounded exactly like Zelensky, and he somehow got Christine to call him up. And they're talking about Russian sanctions, and he's calling her a really sexy little minx, and he didn't use those words, but he's like, I think you look very nice, huh? You're a very pretty European lady. And so, mate, and she's talking about Russian sanctions and embargo and so on, and about 15 minutes in, they ask her about CBDCs. Mate, you have to watch it. I mean, the prank call is unbelievable. It's hilarious. I mean, it's very serious, because they asked her very serious questions, which is quite good. It's hilarious that she's being pranked because it's not Zelensky. But they asked her about CBDCs, and the woman point blank, thinking she's on a call with Zelensky, says a couple of scary things, as a president of the European Central Bank, which is that we are rolling out the digital currency, that it's already illegal to spend more than 1,000 euros in Europe in cash, and that effectively we want programmable money that then we can control and issue as currency that you use how we want to use it. And she's expecting 1 trillion euros to be injected in the flow of the central bank currency. Research, we don't have time. I wish we had time for me to speak more about it, because it's quite as AI, it will change the landscape of our financial system for sure, of our social system. But effectively, our digital money that is currently backed by something becomes money on the blockchain, which allows the central bank to control where you deposit it, how you deposit it, and how you spend it. So at that moment in time, you having a euro being deposited onto a certain domain is trackable and blockable. And you will have regulation influencing players simply by saying, okay, if you have a limit of X amount that you can spend on gambling, then it doesn't matter if it's Ladbrokes, Betfair, Paddy Power, or so on. All of these combined, I can see how much you spend on gambling, and I can tell you how much. Can you afford it? Let me see your taxes, right? So I think that the situation is going to get worse, not better, because the natural next step, when you can't motivate people to do what you want, is to force them to do what you want. And if you can't force them through fear of criminality and so on, you can force them through control. And digital money gives the governments that kind of control. And you'll see more people moving toward what market dictates, which is, I want to play, and I don't want to tell you how much I'm going to spend playing or how much I won. I don't want to pay taxes on my winnings. You want 50K? 35%, right? So you'll actually, I think that the divide will go deeper, and I don't see how we turn back from that. It's just something to observe and watch.
Let's close with a cliffhanger today.
Okay.
And so what you're saying sounds quite dystopian. And we live in a society, I think, in our lifetime, the only thing that we have experienced is moving towards a more liberal and free society.
Mm-hmm.
And so we take that somewhat for granted, that the more we progress, the more things we invent, the more things we learn, the more information is out there, the more free and open our society will become. However, if we look at the arcs of history, if we zoom out to we think in 10-year perspectives, because we are just not old enough to zoom out further than that. But if we look at the world from 100-year perspectives, this is where we see the rise and fall of empires. And Ray Dalio, who is the biggest hedge fund manager in the world of Bridgewater, biggest hedge fund in the world, he wrote a book called The Rise and Fall of Empires, and the lessons that we can draw from this, because this is a repetitive pattern. We saw the rise and fall of the Dutch Empire, that led into the British Empire taking over, with the British pound being the world's reserve currency. After the Second World War, even though the British won the Second World War, it hurt them so badly economically that the American Empire took over, and the Americans leveraged the Second World War in order to establish the US dollar as the world's reserve currency. And every time we see a shift in the world order, we see a new world order being born. And this is this world order that we're living under today, the American world order. We see the whole financial system being basically built upon this world order, and we see the consequences of the Second World War and the change in world order, setting up a whole new financial system in the world, and a whole new structure in the world, and a whole new power dynamic in the world, that then leads to a free, more open society and so on. However, Ray Dalio, he makes the argument that we are at the end of the American empire, and when empires are about to fall, it's generally don't fall peaceful.
Yeah.
And in peaceful times, that is where we see a push for an open society. You know, everyone is an individual. Pursue your happiness, pursue your freedom, make the most out of your life. However, when we go into more uncertain times, it becomes a lot more about the collective, and it becomes a lot more about the country that you live in preserving and protecting itself at the expense of people's freedoms.
Yeah.
So while we take for granted today that we should be able to do whatever we want with our money, we should be able to own Bitcoin if we want, we should be able to own currency in whatever shape or form we want and transact and so on. In uncertain times, countries become more protective. They might not allow you to even own cryptocurrencies and so on. This is what countries do when they enter more uncertain times. Say Russia are in war. It's very difficult for Russia to exchange the ruble for other currencies, right? It's a typical war economy. And when we go into the future, if we go into more uncertain times, the launch of CBDCs and other means to keep the population together, to control the population, into focus our society towards a common goal, which is self-preservation, might become the norm, yes, and what the concept one. So again, that feeds into your point then of potentially it becomes more difficult to thwart regulation and so on in the future.
You've actually you've really something that I picked up on. You hit the nail on the head, because one of the sentences you said is probably, it won't be criminal to gamble, but you're right. In the case of extreme need for protection and discipline and so on, the rules of engagement change in war.
Exactly. Yes, it's what happens in war.
Yeah.
In war economies, you are not allowed to hold gold, for example. you're only allowed to transact in the country's currency in order to keep the currency strong.
That's how Reagan got away with gold in the 60s.
Yeah. It got away with gold in the 60s because people realized that there's not enough gold in the currency reserve, so there was a run on the bank. Yeah. And as a response to that, instead of running out of gold, they said you are not allowed to now go to.
So what I want to say, I want to rephrase that. The reason why I put it there is because not just in the cases of war, in crisis.
Yeah.
In crisis,
yes.
Governments will turn autocratic.
Yes.
Autocratic. Yes, thank you. Right, and
Asperger's.
Thank you. And in times of crisis, that will happen, and it feels like we're getting there.
Yes.
I have a really funny side note I would like to explore.
Yes.
You know what's the telltale sign of a social collapse of most societies throughout history? It might have been from the same book. I'm not sure. Sexual deviance.
Yeah.
Rise of sexual deviance. I'm not joking. So the whole LGBTQ movement and so on, which by all means I support, is usually the sign. Roman Empire became very liberal, sexual and so on, and that was throughout the empires. Somebody drew that parallel. That's the ultimate point of human freedom.
Yes. And
the ultimate point of liberation, after which societal collapse follows, because we need to, as you say, hard times make strong men make for good times make for weak people. Yes. Weak men, weak people, and weak people make for bad times.
Yeah.
And throughout the history, that was the pinnacle. And we kind of feels like we're there. I don't want to be too dystopian, too dark, but it kind of feels like we're there. Like we've had every freedom we could possibly imagine. We forgot what it feels to be told no.
Yes.
Right? Everything's a yes.
Yeah.
And it's kind of. I wonder what the next thing is going to look like.
And the dichotomy at play is the more freedom we get, the more society is torn apart. Because the more freedom, the more individual freedom people get, the more they go away from each other, right? So the more polarized the society gets, and the less unisome the society gets, and that eventually leads to friction, which leads to a civil war, and it's a restart of society.
Yeah.
And in hard times, the idea is that we don't want people to have different opinions. We want people to
pull on the same rope.
Pull the same rope, and that's all that matters.
But is it individual freedom, or is it the rise of identity, group identity? Right, because you said we increase individual freedoms, and what I've perceived is that individual freedoms of expression have been decreasing with the rise of group identity. Like you have to be more liberal, let's say, or you have to allow for more freedoms, and if you don't, then you're bad, and that actually that creates that division. As you said, ironically, the dichotomy of individual freedoms increasing. I think the dichotomy is that as we push for freedoms and for an approach, a certain point of view, we create a separation in society. That chasm grows further.
Yeah, I think you can see it. We were going to round up this conversation. This is typical you and me, Igor. But anyway, I think you can see it. I'm formulating the thought as I'm speaking now, so this might come out wrong. But I think you can relate it to a natural evolution, and animals we evolve based on our circumstances, and you have. Wolves that become dogs, and within the dog species there's 1,000 different type of dog races, and in language, in the language that we speak, if we look at a local level, I speak Swedish, but if I look at more local level, I speak Småländska, which is a dialect of Swedish. And then you can zoom out, and I speak Småländska. I speak Swedish as the next step. The next step beyond that is I speak Germanian, and the next step beyond that is I speak human language, let's say.
Vocalize,
Yeah, and so you see evolution taking place when you have subgroups similar as well. So in a liberal society, say that you are coming out of the Second World War, you have a population that is very homogeneous, that is following a certain
pull the same
trend.
for a while.
And if we then allow individual freedom, and if we promote individual freedom, you will then see you will then see a divergence for this homogeneous group that will be not that noticeable. It will be kind of like small differences in political opinion, but at the end of the day, we can all agree, kind of thing. And eventually, you'll see our thoughts and our opinions evolving in different groups that are more and more less and less, that has less and less in common with each other. Just like in language, eventually you will get to a point where you don't understand the person that is next to you, because you speak a different dialect, but you all speak the same language. But then eventually you speak a different language, and you kind of can understand the other person. Like I can kind of understand Danish people. They can kind of understand me. And eventually you get to a point where you just cannot understand each other. And similar in the in our thoughts and where our moral compass is and so on. Eventually, if you let society if you let individuals themselves dictate what their thoughts and moral compasses and so on, without a central entity that is trying to keep things together, eventually it will lead to subgroups that are so far apart that they speak a different language. Yes, and so that inevitably leads to conflict, and that's where the society gets torn apart, right? And in times of war, that is the opposite of what you want. You need people to work towards a common goal, because it's self-preservation. You
can't afford division.
Yeah, and here's the interesting thing. So even though, and we see this in Israel now, for example, where before the terrorist attack took place on October 7th, Israel was a highly divided country politically. A lot of protests against Netanyahu, very divided society. And after the terrorist attack, Israel and its population has come together in a much more self-preservation.
Yeah, that's
purposes.
a common enemy.
Yes. Same thing happened after 9/11 in the US, where before 9/11, US was highly divided, and as tragic as that terrorist attack was on 9/11, it pulled the country together. If you look at the approval rates of George Bush, it went from 30% to like 90%, right? We can't even imagine today in the US either a Republican or Democratic president with a 90% approval rating, unless the country is facing an existential
crisis
threat and something that pulls the country together again towards a common goal. And that's at the end of the day, beyond the self-preservation, we want to self-preserve ourselves.
So we can go on forever. So I'm going to end it on a question. Okay. So how much of that can be engineered to create a common enemy, a common crisis, to Agenda 2030 of UN and so on, to create an environment where, let's say, powers that be would see the disparagement, would see the division in people, would see that there, let's say, loss of control or maybe a bit too much freedoms or whichever, and we create a system by which we have a reason to unify people, and we have a reason to discipline them and tell them to pull on the same rope. I'll leave you with that thought, because I'm not convinced that it's all a natural progression. And I think that there is an undertone of design, maybe not to the extent of conspiracy theorists, but there's an undertone of design and movement of society towards that crisis mode, so we can all come together and get disciplined again.
All right, that will be the homework for the class, and we'll see you in the next episode, the next class here. Igor, thank you so much for today. 3 hours later, it was fantastic.
What a pleasure.
What a journey, my friend.
All right, just for the record, we booked an hour and a half.
Yeah.
We had a very strict, we agreed on a very strict on agenda.
And we didn't go through half of it.
We didn't go through half of it.
All right, that leaves a lot for the next one. Thank you, my friend.
Thank you, buddy. Take care. Ciao, ciao.
Amazing.